May your spirit and guidance be in us as we work for the benefit of all our people, for peace and justice in our land, and for the constant recognition of the dignity, aspiration of those who we serve. Amen.
Minister's statement. Northwest Territories Housing Corporation. Mr. Speaker, Ajina Metada Adute Quenushinata Tete Kotani Lisi Metada Ade AD Diadute Gotlin De Zaro Sika DQ Dan Dico de Jide Koka Indigenous Government Go Galaita Government Canada Go Galaita Go stakeholders. Is the order says we clean it that they go clean the housing corporation. In that seat the 2021 Housing Corporation Program Transition Rental Supplementary Program Tanigechu 100% government Northwest Territories. So by Niganila, he got 250,000 clear guy county. Again, lot of the 50 clients. Is it Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation? It is Northwest Territories Housing Corporation, the Canada Housing Business Program again. Lot 2 CMHC, the KC program is 2021 goes to 2028 goes to AC. Is 9.6 million. Yoagila, Yoniginida, Yikareti Gidi. 2022-2023 is a Kani day 2.55 million, 88 million to the programs, 1.75 million 2021-21. It's a 250. He crazy as rogotin day go out the Ijigagan loud the April in the good league. Canada housing he met the subsidy program 30%. He met the income out there. He had the rent. Got any day 2021 is any day around $800 per month. He rent as the 50-50 out at the government North Territories with the government Canada. He takes national housing strategy federal government out there. As he is the case, the Quago Telecitanish. Do the Quago Kizina Tekarushi, do Ajetats and Lattes, they do the NWT housing benefits. 250 NWT households is Tatagate. The Law Housing Corporation is 50 applications. To Canada Housing Benefits is 20%. The order to the NWT goes at the NAC County to the Kagoti Housing Corporation. It is the Iraqin da se istiazu leke tiago zao dia di da di da di le nage deze kezine zugo zao dia zgon. Agent ici la Mr. Speaker, la CC, the child care in da sa, gote room chu on, the agent cantine the order si katule. They get yeah, they tira to late the associated fuel they can ride in the contenders on Sundays you are in the sunny day in the Samonisia. The benefits to cut the wrong government sits on the Quetzalcoatl that it's a canny day, with a honey tiny day cargo to Liatule. ka ko de jin dage ko zai di na ho di ze ke ne zu ko go ani ze ni de a de ma si ne san the government can da si ko ga lai da se zan ni ji li yi ze ke chi di song lang di mo na ze ka ye ti sa government e di kan de si se ni ge a de ko tin de ge ani de san zo de ka ye lia go on e ji la ti o Canada housing benefit is Yakala, Nazan Yukala Seat Island. Mr. Speaker, do ministry do the housing corporations Kakala Whitley Galanda, the Ozen is in partnership is in the Jizzy. I didn't the others are do the Canada, New Zealand. Because as you staff housing corporations, they can must go to Senator.
Thank you, Minister. Minister statements. Minister statements.
Minister, Education, Culture, Employment. Mr. Speaker, Legislative. Ka. Ajili Zekesi, the Universal Child at the Dutta Gotlin there. Machine seducing at the Karusi, the Canada Go Galanda, the Cardisi, the Hedegardisia. Dutsen, is the January 1st got any do got any day retroactive got there. The Sutan Sulai got the Jui 50% got some bagonos here. This is 2000 go easy got idea. This is January 1st is got. Family says the order is the case like you got on 2026 got then can DC cost $10 leads and chick to Tara, Niti Auntie. Mr. Speaker, the Universal Child Care is on. To the order to Taza D is 300 to Tashi to a rogo clean day is he goes out there. Is a cage go out and a ten was ended to Targat and a Tezeke on. Candidate amigo walk on a tasty was a witches diaja, Hajigala gita the key, got a dowdy. To take out in date and as it's attacked. She take a gotten as go, Nakina hit the case gotten da. Do without the two cents who lie out with a Mikala da, the suta the case without the ticket. With the action plan, gotten da. Jimeta harder than the Catula go tight, the Ajita case that go dizeke. The federal agreement government Canada issues 67.1 million as he Nigeria to take 2,000 last lagai. It's a case continue the action plan in the Hajon to start a case continue with the child care system Gagoda. Masi Indigenous government, Indigenous organization, Kotatake, non-profit organization, licensed learning early childhood program, got a teachers as Masi go to Senate, the 2030 early childhood care strategies. As on WT, caught in a Minagatezeke on. Kakala got IT as going to Nazani. The other countries Masi go get easy got out the go now they where tea got a reason is a Kizzy governor territories. Shall not sail on the foundation the other gonna get a candy day. Can't the other Nezia, the do they go family see, can't they see to the Lagoata got a two legos out the. Mr. Speaker, the investment that case in a car the Cagotiane, 2,000 go out and a chosen Najesi. Dane thou any day can't do more than they are to take out in there. Must Member Statement, Haver South. '40th anniversary do Kamba Carnival is New Gia, Masikodisia. Ti 25 se gayo mo ni. Ta je minister te kesi. Je te kesi akala muri sholendi.
As we now see COVID restrictions begin to lift, with more anticipated for April 1st, this event is a good
Tutti COVID te ke tiaten la. Ita ron se tu tanao ke jesi kwa. Koni gu ta ti ko ti ji te kesi kandi di kamba carnival si kwa ko ti masi gini de. Ta ti te kesi a ron te kesi kandi si di somba se di tanete ta ko zao ti te kesi ga zanta. Kamba carnival la ka zo ze ka kwa ti. Yi ze hone ta si mi zang di somba si ko ta za di. Yi ze ke ka ko ti ji ko ta ta di a ze gong. A ron ze kesi. Ta yi ze ke za na ki na ga ne zuga. Ta du wa ye si ze kesi. Te yi ze ke a ron e zi me ta nao ze yi ze ke na yi la dao ze se bingo la shua ko ti talent chu la shua ko kan dia ge. Ta si MLA ze kesi North e si a ron kato de che ze kesi. Masi kato de che First Nation committee ze kesi. Kamba Carnival committee masi go du di. Ta a ron ze kesi masi go ze ti inde ne zuga ne. Masi.
Statements. Member for Thabacha.
Tabacha. Di eta teacher ke wo guinde yundi khata. You Minister Justice kesi di contract kesi gani te goza ta dindi di za teacher kesi o tu te go tinde. Di kone zugo o te kesi da tigen di ze ade. Edi diago ke se la. Etandi tene za di ze ke tu te go tinde. Ta di tlege kane zura se ze. Kandigo ta magazan da ne guli. Da a si ze kesi gazan da. Tu te za ti ze kesi ga. Tu go go wanda. 2010. A ron di za ti ze kesi. Me go zu da ze di. Si la ga go zoni a. I ze ke za ti da di. Go ke zen di ze. Go ze chu me ga shu kong di ni ze ni la. Di yu kan ze kesi. A ron go zao di a ze gong. 7 members. Ta ze kesi la di First Nations. Ta ze xie ze kesi a za ti. Me ze staffing e si ku lia zu le ke ti. In le. Di ku. Di ji za ti ze ke ta go ze le ze kesi. Go ze chu. Kon di ka gi oda e za ti si. Ne zu kon za gen di a ze gong. Go ze we za chu go zao di a ze gong. A si ze ke ka zan e ta ni de. A ron ze ke ya. Si commanding officer ze ke si ki se son a si da go zan di le di ko ta ze ke go ze kon de ze. Dan di mo di shon. Si Salisbury First Nation ze ke ga ni de. Ki na se lang di yu te on le.
CMP and the community leadership. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the other day in answering one of my questions, the Minister of Justice stated he did not have significant concerns about the transparency and accountability of the RCMP.
Ji za tia ji go ke go on xin. Ye ho mo go go jin de. Tu te go jin de yo.
Unanimous consent to conclude my statement.
Thank you. Member for Thabacha. The member seeking unanimous consent to conclude her statement. Are there any nays? There are no nays. You may conclude your statement.
There are people who feel
Dene Zhatıé ka go ga sule di ze ke xin a. Ka a ron ze ke tene ka da a ze ke xin. Ka son kan di si go e ta ti go go ze za gen di ke ju kan di go za di le. Yi ze hone da chia go ze de si ka go ti. Di ze ke tu ze ke ga go da. Tene kandi ki o kon delinde ka chao tere sinde ka kandi ki tu ma chindi. Iji chu ga zanda tu. That Mr. Speaker, Kala Kadusienese, Kandio Kame Kyodason, the Zati Kisio, Itati Ganda. Not the minister that you can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Thabacha. Member statements. Member statements. Member for Nivik Twin Lakes.
Nivik Twin Lake. The agent a fait ce conseil qu'ici, the Russia should Ukraine to agent dégé. Taji tene kandisi, Ukraine goes at Tenisi Koga, Koki, Titi. Agent Taco, the Casey, or come kill the region. The Casey. Agent the Casey Kandi, Chicago. That donation that you got out, the Gotats and the Ukraine. NWT the Casey, the Russia the Casey, agent could treat Russia the Casey, agent Ijigit. Ijishuga, that Trudeau the Casey, Ijishukaila, come Kyoricho, Nakia agent the Casey. Ka Russia go Saditi, that they got in their Kagondi. A federal support is issue. The airport si China Gucha, the Casey to the got in there. That too is the Casey. Russian is not targeting. Because they yet a lot China in La, Joyalanai, is yet down there.
Mr. Speaker, I recognize that the GNWT does not manage Canada's Arctic border security or the national defence, but the GNWT does have a responsibility to
Naki GNWT the federal government is one like go on the DZK. No date is premier what I do can end DZK when you.
For Nivik Twin Lakes. Member statements. Member statements. Member for Great Slave.
Great Slave.
There were no outstanding issues with the Sobering Centre. Mr. Speaker, this was in stark contrast to what a then-employee described after contacting my office. It was surprising to me that the centre was only being inspected when the contract.
The Sobering Centre the case the contract you get like in touch the case was. Down dida la the condisi la down the mentality gala the pandemic a good charico down the year the Tago de Kijigo get I was a Zenagi did. The ministry the Tisa used good as wrong. The county the Kitago the Kende. Clear right like home. Kina the Kagin delay. It had the contracting the Kagani day, Nahete Kagetias go. Istio tele ale. That you do guys who can't dig Gatanda. Mentadi gets in a task. Dagon did a good day. He the murder there, Mugazan, Damagazan at Tide, needs you and say, Candigo, Ka, SCTC, Candici, the Kizigazan, Tiny Day, a Tandy New Tea, any day, Kago Chale, make out the Shule. The ministry like good as on day, Candigo here, Halandi, I la. The government will go in there, you could have to lick it. A tight all a cock on there. I see like I said, like he government easy. Mr. Speaker, Tizeke la Danet on there. Danet la Dade tea on the Tizeke got and Dani there. Minister, you see, not any day come a garden with Tambour water in DC, na handy. Tight all like down the IOD short Tizeke. You see. 他是在给你的那看有我是那在看地区看的是看的那他你的那现在给他安的，看这个看工地嘞，没得所谓听叫的种在那里面叫的种，是我的心的嘛是。
Thank you, member for Great Slave. Member statements. Member statements. Member for Kamlik.
Kamlik. Di teke mogu sene se kota teke si won. Down di e lle gala di de down di le zani yagin di staff teke deko ai chelen dage kan du lle gala gen. Mr. Speaker, could the yin dage the government's policy te hwana du te gotin de Housing Corporation teke di koka di met policy si du te Suarete sa nagi tendezo Northwest Georgianezo tu le kwego wagutashi tiu tinagan de teke ijigon ka de ji da di teke gatan dani de etandira la ko se title o tetandia tu le tene county si ne zugo taiti di policy teke not the teke ani dendi community resident policy teke si ijuka Mikigoten dea sese liazago, dute organization tekeda. Containers argent, et les lani deni zugo kyo tia dule. Iseke juades. Argent government, na tagen dia, na tataget indini de di tlesi application teketa dule razanda. Argent government jini de ka. Tenesi utina che teze chiese cagua conte asgon, di tazo di cleggi di quindi de coni de zutta cantera. Zutta ze honetani dene zugo che utia zondi. United Nations che Article 21 is UN, the United Nations che Indigenous people ga. Dati ze che si, canti si, na che se ore, na chiana che go, the housing minister, di Tiesara. Tutte na target in de na target in de ka the na the housing corporation is gakota. O any day a get jazz di the kenny de kago ni good as on tutte. Ya number 2 on it. That the government is in condition a kenny de quite a kenny de kayo go and de as gone. Tashu Quentin si ji ke ni de tenesi kotao jadi ti ta go get here.
Thank you, member for Kamlik. The member seeking unanimous consent to conclude her statement. Are there any nays? There are no nays. You may conclude your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apparently have a lot to say on this one. Number 3, housing needs need to be addressed by specific community.
Kesika kotsekatsa tiazo community take dita karda. Yatana skulti awne ochuni zende ka. Maga good azon. The number 4 la ihtiafitli as go dizeke. The order the nagalagi dende ka isti guarionita azon. Aji guayasela te kesi gondi. Dene Zhatıé Housing Corporation agent yeda dine detule meke tago zenaute tehali. Kantine zone zugane sendi.
Sufficiency through housing, because that is not fair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member for Kamlik. Member statements. Member statements. Member for Yellowknife North.
Yellowknife North. The minimum wage ke go zan di ze ke si tare de ze ke si ga magazana ta zgon kan du ka gon di le me ze hone ta dia gon de go ze di minimum wage si line ni de kan du ka gon di le she ze ke zo ji tu te ko tin de ge na zan de ga ni de tu te ko tin de ge ni de go de ti go zan di a zo go ti mo zo go de ti kwen je na zan de ga ni de i ji wa de ita de minimum wage si dia zo le ji na de ze ke go de ti ze hwan da kan dia o ka ju xie ne sen tu zan go tin de ga kan di go ka me kyu ti ge ni zen da pandemic je kesi arjonshi $18 an hour sitla. Ishituka megwana hute kantigo ji oze shi kutantini delhite gazela masienesia. Tiazin lanezo. Manitoba kakoton kagila BC ko sane arjon ijeta di kesi tiagila. Yukon Saskatchewan ijekirga kala yindadi kigineta. Ta nakshi jota tukasi tiazon. Ijeke minimum wage ke gani de tiasi line dezo. Inflation huti tio de jitawars. Minister da du keneti zeke o masin.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife North. Member statements. Member statements. Member for Framley.
Framley. The greenhouse gas 30% juasita 2030. The NWT zeke la kakala kola kandi fossil fuel zeke zin yogidi a ti tanegeze le zeke tao. Ta ti zeke kakota. Iji honet aisi greenhouse gas could lini de katile disi na metasi teni de yatagulia godan disi honda climate change disi. Yukon kagoto kagin
Research Council on Biofuel Substitution that was carried out in 3 phases. In the first phase, the Council identified petroleum fuel demand and required specifications.
Chumago tazo dukte zekezi kandi klegeze lezeke goze kandi na di ani dendi. Dukte go klinde ani de go deti kandi go tizeke greenhouse gases si honda gulia gocha jandi kandi zinlani de la ti klezekezi de kya yende tiatale adulan. Men dazi gwazan dazi go tizekezi. Me a pilot project on the dukte go klinde.
Significant potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Katule juate the greenhouse gas de koni de kakala mekani tazagon. Dice kesi tu ze kala diesel da go dinda kotaisi. Go de ti dice ke. Da $62 million ligai. Go de tione 517 anitani la I onza 2030 zeke auza. O kianet e onde zeke gatanda di Tulsan expansion zeke osho. Da di kandi zeke gatanda ni de di tane fuel suppliers si di hutli ko ke go on di zeke.
Liquid fuels in Canada. The standard could be used to encourage the production of Arctic-grade renewable diesel by providing extra incentives. So where do we go from here, Mr.
Da go tize go di dia jogoza. GNWT zeke gatanda oki.
Confirm that equipment and infrastructure are compatible with renewable diesel blends. And second, a cold weather test of the performance of diesel fuels. I'll have questions for the Minister of Infrastructure later today on next.
Thank you,
Member for Frame Lake. Member statements. Member statements. Member for Yellowknife South.
Thank you, Mr.
Yellowknife South. To Margaret Henderson, zeke, jesi zeke go megatundati volunteer zeke award magonta 2021. Do guys zeke shu. Si zeke tandi galan da zeke si to te Yellowknife zeke ga. Da masi. The condition zeke ko galanda the organization zeke ta hazoko galanda da Margaret Henderson masi du sien was arrangina galanda the zeke the outstanding elder volunteer award moto masin.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife South. Member statements. Member statements. Returns to oral questions. Returns to oral questions. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Member for Tunde Welde.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize.
issue ka education zeke hesiga koga gunat that's zeke masi chati I do sindi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the House. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Inuvik Twin Lake. I'll meet the gallery at the
Uvik, Lillian Elias, and Valerie Stephenson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Inuvik got the Okita Tataya Geti Yageti, that's a Karusindi.
Twin Lakes, I'd like to welcome everyone in the chamber today, especially our interpreters who are, well, just reminded me, I was asked yesterday to remind members to speak slowly.
Titi Tataya Tite Kesi, Tinequandi, do not go Tandagindi. That is a Kimena Dindi. Kai Hitli Egalagan, Takamikuricho, Nakiti was not Traguti. Kenati, at a Masi, Mrs. Churkin, Masi Chong, Joshi, Jo in the Tenega, Josaneta Masi.
Acknowledgements, member.
Acknowledgement, Frame Lake, Masi, Mr. President. 2. Eva Henderson, 96 Mehule. 1974, Equatorial Tata, registered nurse, started in hospital Galinda, Kota Young Life Home Care Service Nuno. Editia, member of Northwest Territory Nursing Association. Kota, she ran bed and breakfast, Metanehe. Eva, Ijin is on the night clock on the Guanta. If you cast out them and on the Masi. Masi member.
Oral questions, member for Haver South.
Haver South, oral questions, Mr. Speaker. Hon infrastructure Megonguinde. Ijikotesi la ka Mendadi Coinda. Tutte Gotlinde Ganide. Ajidi zeke tule tatele zeke omote kaya iti zeke. Now, Mr. Speaker, Minister, si tule na zekati di zeke siyo kandi zeke gani dendi.
Thank you, member for Haver South. Minister responsible for infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can advise our understanding is that the plane is registered to a company in Austria. The flight originated in Geneva, Switzerland, until the Canadian Border Service met the plane here in Yellowknife and determined that the passengers were Russian nationals. There were no flags raised. Queen Aini.
Thank
you. You know, flight zones, Honda Yatalachina in law, the Yendi, Tutena and Diga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Minister for that confirmation. And with the nationality of the passengers being Russian, I guess, what's the current status of both the passengers and the aircraft at this time? Thank you, Mr.
Speaker. Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada continues to gather the facts required to be able to make a determination on the next steps regarding these passengers.
Tandi Chesiat got a letter, Canada, Gotana Desi, Tugakala Mentadic is an eta, Yatalai, Tihonedayandi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I understand that the passengers were looking at going on an expedition, and given that, I just ask if the Minister's Department was contacted by either the
Russians a passenger la Sikagnata Yaget Yandi. The minister Motomoti la Sia Gyogadejoti Kikakondi Azin.
Thank you, member for Haver South. Minister responsible for infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there was no knowledge of the expedition.
The expedition Kisi la Kina Zekatindile. Infrastructure is the question. 现在这个土这个要到了呢，大金青年金了。到底这个原来 First Nation 是可以创这个是，各个这个的是啊，提供第二个的样的嘛是。
Final supplementary member for Haver South.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with what has taken place in Ukraine, we need to talk about sovereignty, protections, and monitoring in Northern Canada. I also find it very disappointing that the federal government is not providing timely information that involves Russian nationals. Can the minister advise how her department will rectify this communication failure with the federal?
The minister 啊，去对了个这个地道的来做成的这个是我样的。
The structure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So once we opened the borders to tourists on March the 1st,
March 1st 呀，tourists 啊说，我打开地区，啊，让些这些 restriction 那些没完了，会对的。那第二看了大概个这个些啊，其他对莫上的啥的下个我们的嘛些。
Oral questions, member for Thabacha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Justice...
Thabacha. The case la si tu le minister si naga ki chu tu te ko tin de ke ga si ti eta ti ke si ko te ka se dia ze le ayan di.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have the data at my fingertips, so I'd be...
John, c'est not his sure that
Mr. Speaker, in my member statement, I talked about the government of the Yukon conducting a review of the Yukon Police Force. That review produced a final report, along with several recommendations for improving oversight to the RCMP and building trust with the public. The NWT could learn a thing or two from that work. Has the Minister or the Justice Department ever looked at the Yukon's police force review?
Yukon,
For justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I haven't read the report, but when the member brought it to my attention, I did have a brief look at it.
Department of Casing, Tajit Casing, Etati Henite, Ajonshi Magaita, the Northwest Territories, the Yukon take on the Yukon Univate the NWT the Kagani de Kakala take a report is Hitsi and the Masin.
Questions, member for Thabacha.
Mr. Speaker, can the Minister tell us if he or the Department of Justice has ever considered conducting a review of the NWT's police force like what has been done in the Yukon? Thank you, Mr.
Review. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, in 1999, the Yukon government created the Commanding Officers Yukon First Nation Advisory Committee. It was created to foster a healthy and positive relationship between First Nations and the
First Nation the Indigenous group the care. He do tell a tagondi the care ending.
For Thabacha, Minister responsible for justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Commanding Officer of G Division.
You caught the Indigenous Advisory Committee co set up Gotegunde. Etagoti the case here, car, then a nation to go again down the program the case here.
And the GNWT, the RCMP, and Salt River First Nation are working together to address.
As on targeted a legal again down the GNWT First Nation got the government massively.
Oral questions, member for Nivik Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said in my member statement, I would have questions for the Premier. Can the Premier explain how the GNWT...
In Nivik Twin Lake, that the Premier situlei on the National Defense Kegare Siende.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canada takes the lead on international security.
Zekela magako tazago the national defense kesi eti tiago tasa lani de Canada is a member on the kesi ta di tiesa kozata di tiazago Canada United States si di kandida kandinigini wa de jizekedi kozeni de de go tin de gi go kyo di zeke wa de ni kewo di 이제 계지 가긴 라윤디 베게 라도 대고튼데 그 다니게 주연.
Is a priority for the GNWT and for our Indigenous partners. It's
이 security 제케오고 된데 대고튼데 있다네시 제케 카라 아주 그 타즈고 거기 디제 괜히데 대고튼데 이니데 카 메타시티 아즈고 딱이 디제 계시 오야는데 간딘데서 그 카텔라니데 그 타시티 그 자이티 그 자존의 계시에고 에세제 카디티 타고 디제 계시 디 National Defense Head, Coast Guard, Canadian Space Agency, RCMP, United States Maritime, 그 non-government organizations 게 이자존의 계사고 타고 나 작은 디제 계한테 마시.
Premier, oral questions. Member for Nivik-Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding of the Arctic Council that Russia is now been made the chair in the last time that they met. So what role does the
Arctic Council 제게시 Russia chair긴 라 시에요데 이제 계시야. 그때 NWT 제게라 해당디 고게데티 디라타자고 겐데니 데엔.
Nivik-Twin Lakes, Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Arctic Council is actually a forum for cooperation and collaboration on critical.
At Tiraco and the Arctic Council Henide, at the work at Dion. Dago Tizekesi, Ukraine, the Corny, the Canada Henide, Kahutli, Iwanagan, the Justice Zekesi, the Condisia Mida Tata Gogidesi Zekesi, 2 years ago. Go the Kagus Chasi, go any day, Ajon territories Zekesi, right out him when I need it. That the Prime Minister JC Kandi Yokaya Tindenes or the security Zekaditi. Got the Aron the Casing you done Naya Tituin Bainy Day, Kandi Shu Danini Chua, the Aron restriction as I think at the Canada in the Massey.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Oral questions. Member for Nivik-Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I think in this House, when it was raised yesterday that there was Russian plane landing, you know, everybody's kind of gets excited, and we think for a while there we're just watching it on TV, but you know, it's just over the ocean for us. It's just across the road, or some may say. So, does the Premier expect an increase of military presence in the NWT, especially around the coast?
Got in down others are situate military. Candy working the end, the Jokwa Yalan, Joyan like Russian yet Alanet, I just a Kirago Daga Hadadarsi. Cut do Godakadi to the Premier. Is it a case la car Megaita? Ajon me o good do. Tina heta Guchatek. The Russians a case me yet allies Kala. He said to Canada, take it, the hard dinosaur. The Prime Minister denied it. TJ Casey to take out in there. Antigo Naze Kaditi. Cut the Russian tourists not target the agite. Come good us. The entire family members says he do the NWT Nagate. Taji the Casey Gazanda. Key honey laget you on the let TJ came in Landi. So Russian Dene Zhatıé Tago Tizekizika Kyogere Joan. It is Tikwa Gogo San Hargo Tigo Sageti. GNWT the Kazi got a Jean the Kini de Kag Go Tirande. Got a shit of Wogetia, Tikaga Kanaku Telejagandi, Massin.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Final supplementary. Member for Nivik-Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Premier, for that. You know, I just wanted to bring it up in the House so that way, you know, our residents know kind of where we are.
Premier na te kadindi dia ron ka go tinde chi tane kyo gre jo di ta go cha ze ke sin ki na go sa ke dia de di ma si ta ka kan di si tane si tu the Russian family si kan na ta ke di da go di sin di tu ze ke da na za ke dia ka ma si go ni te a ze go yi da di COVID si dia zin la zin ho na da ka Dene Zhatıé dia tu te go tin de ke choose ande masi na te kaya ne tiende.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Nivik Twin Lakes. Take that as a comment. Thank you. Oral questions. Member for Great Slavey.
Great Slavey.
By the GNWT, is the department going to retain the dozens of
Department employees again the GNWT generally declined the aroma the information is needed. Situate the key work on the end machine.
Responsible for Health and Social Services.
Minister of Health and Social Services case machine the member the kakaya the machine. That do le mona the caress. AWT the case can DC do go DC he a galagan that do ki gago the center the case. Da kana the kagidin D is the case is the Thai sago the sigadi can I get delicate. That's what the Thai sana he can do new to the co. Can D can go any day kageti. Kati staff te ke shweni te kia ien ko tia kandio di te ke shelter si kandio kia kandi si akala me ko tia se ko yandi.
Shelter, the one that's on 50th Street, will be for sobering protection.
Te shelter ko ke te ni te atane ko asine te tau ta ki ke te me ke o ti ji te ke ga de di center kandio kia ni den. Ita Hutli koko sagon de ale landine se di khadi khatatinde kiko zaiti ze ke gazwand.
To the Disability Council staff to work with us if they're interested in doing that. So our priority, of course, is to ensure that the homeless population.
It's a priority si la ditane kwego zelesi ji gasit land. Kande ko zaiti adule.
Thank you, Minister. Oral questions. Member for Great Slavey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually think that's going to help some of my constituents at Norseman who complain of people leaving the day shelter and then wandering into their apartment building at night. So I'm happy to.
The day shelter the kikandi hujena gane tijidar simasiatin.
Past and present employees of the Sobering Centre to ensure that their experience and their knowledge is being captured and retained in order to inform future operations, but also to help with the
The shelter zeke tanti gala ta zeke la situle ye kagane tati zeke. Yundi ye gala talen de kashu siguru mo ta tatule senatetle jiwaresin.
Responsible for Health and Social Services.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that. The day shelter services were evaluated in 2019, and we learned
2019 e kuma oita asil so desi or the day shelter zeke sea.
And turned everything upside down. The Disabilities Council was able to provide some innovative service, especially in the early going, where they provided a place for people to stay 24 hours a day.
Council
on contract with the NTHSSA, and I can certainly mention to the staff that it might be a good idea to connect with the staff generally, but we have to respect the fact that in this situation, the Disability Council is the employer.
The Disability Council to the contract
and the knowledge that the Disability Council and its staff have acquired in the last 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Oral questions. Member for Great Slavey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister herself said, that being in 2019 was pre-COVID, so I do think there is definitely some lessons to be learned and knowledge to be captured by following through on that. And I would ask that hopefully the Disabilities Council would work with the Minister and the Department to provide some feedback. My next question is, it only seems to me to be a retaliatory measure. Why did the Minister ask the RCMP to investigate the whistleblowers? The Safety Act enshrines a worker's right to a safe workplace. How can this be honoured if workers are afraid to speak out for fear of RCMP investigations?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't review the information that was released, but I understand that it breached the private.
That's the ki megandale kadimen the member that is kasiati the private seats ke la tandi o chi ta ti di jago ke o yen.
Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned or confused actually. If the Minister is open to hearing feedback and response, then I'm quite surprised to hear that she never actually read what the whistleblowers had to say about the Sobering Centre. I did, and I actually spoke with them, and what was said to me was quite concerning. So does the Minister commit to ensuring that her colleagues with WSCC have a more proactive inspection going forward with the new contractors such that we're not in this situation again in a year? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the service provider going forward until the summer when the new RFP will be awarded.
Do imbego te hakala kan DC contracts on the GNWT he. Because the members see Katula GNWT go take on Dene Zhatıé a town de shelters the Ojitsekego. Kandi Katula has a land in machine.
Oral questions. Member for Kamloops.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my questions are for the Minister of the Housing Corporation. I'm wondering if the Minister of the Housing Corporation will remove the community residency policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Kamloops. Minister responsible for Northwest Territories.
Titulati community resident policy to Ganda Yendi, the Minister at the DC Laka Megoita Dizeke. Around the game the policies in the corporation J. Ita Ijiteke not a dedeke, you take Gaita co housing authority, the Diago Plaza Landa,
they do have the authority within those local housing organizations, the boards and the chair, to look at lifting the
the board got the chairman again, Lizzie, the Kezi, Ego got the go to residency policy, but then I take at the end in the Massy.
Oral questions. Member for Kamloops.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't have the opportunity to go and talk to all of the different LHOs and let them know how this policy is inadvertently affecting residents of the Northwest Territories. So will the Minister have that conversation with LHOs and
Minister, the policy the Kezi or Tegunde, Silakasia 20.
Responsible for housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, in respect to the local housing authorities and how they manage our service.
The county contract and the housing authorities the Kezi, Kago Tata and the county sea, Senigi Azeki, Sikamaganda, Kotagora Tilgo Downdigo or she down dear seeked and digo to the candidate. Is ya Rokas and Damurati, Tanate Ragot. Taji Honeta the Cocat and Esigote, Gotecose, do the candidate kikireti de coni de. Is it a Honda she like her? That in diesel as a Cambodi short and
students returning back to the communities, incarcerated people returning back to the communities, and we have to
Kotana Kota, then Yagi Dene Day, you the Honda got out the Kurgaita, so car theatre there's going.
That end up with that do have medical issues as well. The applicants come with.
None at the Neshila Jaya Li, the Honda, Onzagitinia, Giti, Tekida, Tizekigatan, as a go. I do housing authorities, you Kagotaki target in the end.
Member for Kamloops.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd love the opportunity to respond to each of those points, but I think you'd cut me off. It sounds to me like what needs to happen is a reassessment of the priority point system that's allocated to residents whose names are on the wait list, so that all of these issues that the minister is stating that add to fairness are the ones actually being evaluated. So will the minister remove the community residency policy and instead
The community resident policy will
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm open to a lot of different changes throughout the corporation.
policy go ta tu te ko tin de ga yan ti ko ke zhe dia zo ya zo ze kan ne des kan dia de dia zhong ze ke de ne xi ti da zo chairman ya ge li de ko ni.
Final supplementary, member for Kamloops.
Mr. Speaker, I've been bringing this policy up in this House since February of 2020, and so I appreciate that the minister is willing to go back and talk to the department and bring
Department go te ko te ko te indicate ta yo che tsena ko te ni te the application te ke jo ande le ma se ne se andi.
My next question for the minister is, how is it fair then if the Housing Corporation cannot stipulate how a wait list is used? However, ECE can stipulate that anybody who wants access to income assistance must put their name on a housing wait list, even if they don't need housing. So I'm wondering why the discrepancy in
She don't did la county housing corporation te ke wo te ti ta ke ti je on te ke she don't ya ke cha ke ti me ke le ja le sen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will have the conversation with my colleague as well in looking at that wait list for income support.
Ji te ke ji me ga ta income support te ke wait list si. Ita member a ji o ko te ti si se ka mo ri sho. Dan ju ka la o kyon da ze ta ko ta ya go la. Sa dan na ke de i di wait list ke 900 go lian. I ja zhong ze ke tu kwe ko ta ze lia go on. I ji da kan di si me ga ta e ti go ke di ti a di kwe ze ke ji. Kan ju no te ni de se department ji ze ke go ze go de de tu le ne ze na ko te yan ni.
The Northwest Territories, but I really want to emphasize one community. We could have 25 people on that wait list, an additional 10 people coming back into the community. I will bring that back to the department. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Oral questions, member for Framley.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. My question is for the Minister of Infrastructure, who has lead responsibility for the 2030 energy strategy. And her department commissioned the recent research on biofuels in the NWT. Now that we know the promise and the challenges that biofuels present, I'd like to know from the Minister, what are the next steps and proposed timelines?
The biofuels ke go te tai to sa te ni ti a ti te ke si o ye ni. The minister ni li zian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The GNWT recently commissioned a study on liquid
biofuels ke si yen da de ke ne ta tu. Ita ji te ke si yen da de ke na ta la kha ni te kha tu le ta de ni ji a te ke si ti ya ta ta kha de de tu le kha ke le. Ka ti te ke si ti se le si te ke ka tu le hu lia te le tu te ko tin de kan di go tu ka lai le.
renewable diesel, and what is being produced is being sold under a contract and cannot be
On the aji etla kha te tla si the contract da si tlia go. Da kan din de la tu le ti diesel si Guli a te lera si etla kha te tla tu le kan tu ko tana di si yen kala me kani thayen ni.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I want to thank the Minister for that. It's my understanding that there's quite a bit of unallocated money remaining from the Federal Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund, but that there's some conditions that prevent its use to fund trials. Can the Minister tell us how much money is left to be allocated and whether a department will ask the federal government to permit use of these funds for trials of biofuels? Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Biofuels ke la tante son pas la yen di kala.
For infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right now, and this is subject to change as we have our year-end numbers, there's approximately 2.7 million available under the
2.7 million kalasata GST program to get lagani de got 30 industry on the March 24th got
funding cannot be used for operational expenses such as biofuels. We have asked the federal government if there's any flexibility.
The federal government dedicated biofuels case Kantiko di DC federal funding is mechanism only the Katule Magatan da DJ.
Minister, oral questions. Member for Framley.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I want to thank the Minister for that. Happy to work with her to put some pressure on the feds. So a significant portion of the carbon tax paid by large emitters goes to fund installation of greenhouse gas reduction infrastructure. But switching to biofuels doesn't really require any infrastructure. And it's not clear whether the retained carbon tax money set aside for GHG reductions can be used to purchase biofuels. Can the Minister confirm whether any of the GNWT retained carbon taxes and or the large emitter trust funds can be used to purchase biofuels for testing in
biofuels not in the end.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Finance administers the Large Emitter Grant Program. However, I do want to, perhaps with my colleagues' permission, speak a bit about the program. It is an application-based program that allows
The application-based program do Tambour gunde di sompa de kesio. Ita ite Honda ni de ka sompa la gulli round.
if a switch to biofuels from regular diesel will reduce GHG emissions by 5% on an ongoing basis, then the large emitter may apply for a grant for those costs of the switch. The cost of the
liquid biofuels is detailed. Is the $100. Does it surely de gully? Handigo Kaza Leda Mandadi is not how the Kaza Leani de Ka do lady the GST the case metasi in Yendi. Candigo Kaza Leani de Ka Mandadico that the carbon tax secure method like the $100
on government priorities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Final supplementary. Member for Framley.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I want to thank the Minister for that. That's probably some of the best reasons I've ever heard to change the large emitter trust account and the policy around that. I've talked to the Minister of Finance about it. She committed to review it. Nothing's changed, nothing. But I want to turn to the report on biofuels identified that 75% of the territory's emissions come from industry. I understand that De Beers, as a large emitter, has as a corporation has committed to carbon neutral by 2030. Yukon government is relying on biofuels as part of its climate change work. The feds are working on clean standards. There's a lot of things working together here. We just need to get our own government on board. So can the Minister tell us whether there are any plans to partner with industry or other governments to conduct a trial of biofuels in the NW?
Thank you.
Biofuels Minister the county project on it Masini Tiagoadini Dene Dendi Codeti and the Deshu the biofuels Come and kill each the county the case la car the government Latin da si county Yathela Ijidawa the sea.
Available for purchase soon. You know, when this happens, we'll be able to look to park.
The Kagon de Annie Dena Hot is right as go on the Cathedral Den the Massin.
Oral questions. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last minimum wage report was never made public, and I understand the minister's position, and he told the committee that the work they would do would remain confidential. But I understand that we're now looking at reviewing the minimum wage again, and I just don't want to be standing here at that time asking that question once again. So can the minister speak to what the process is going forward for the next?
Minister, the minimum wage is kela situle mogo kunde yendi.
Education, culture, and employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Generally, what happens is every 2 years, the minimum wage.
Ukigai tanet any day committee si yegaganda the minimum wage seke. Kote any day to take out in day, kote akon digesti. Kote any day ministry kaneta. Department editi setse kagin dila khani de ka koga kandi kanete go chandi de sinina han. Kantigo committee song on the Galagan down.
Given the criticism by the members about that process, I might be taking a different approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Oral questions, member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure the Minister will keep us appraised of his different approach. One of the things I would really like the Minister to look into is tying our minimum wage to inflation. I know we have the second highest right now, but we're kind of in a tie with Yukon and BC, and it looks like Yukon's going to pass us on April 1 when inflation goes up. And so...
The inflation diatante. Yukon oza konde. It's a kg the minimum wage kg waters. Setting line tetule kogate de hiti. Come dicho. The consumer price on a dash with Diakoti. Daji the care minister situri was at the end.
Fourth, Minister responsible for EC&E.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, Mr. Speaker, the Kakala Cathitale. Kala mendadi quaita is indiga qua $10 on monte minimum wage. The $50.20 go down. Hante. Kanduka ni daude the candidate case here.
And so haven't been in a position where we would want to do that.
The city tia dan deni day. A galatan da the case go down the case diatian. Candiane.
If this is adequate, there needs to be a bit more analysis. So am I willing to look at that? Yes, we always look at that.
Ka na kimendadi quaita, kimendadi quanta city in the car mendadi quaita, disecation.
Thank you, Minister. Oral questions, member for Yellowknife North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spoke earlier that we lost the wage top-up program, which brought many workers up to $18 an hour. And then I think this year we are going to see one of the highest inflations Canadians have seen in years, and the cost of living is not getting any cheaper in the North. I just worry that, we in the NWT are heading down a path where we're making a living wage is just getting harder and harder.
Eti onze kodi jia kodan te jitawa me kaya te gala jite zeke. Situ le NWT gala gite te izi go te kadin di dandi jene tante na ke te zeke gain den di somba zeke ayen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that responsibility is not mine alone.
Minister Atila chi set on tele. Dice que a Jean de Goa con el tete que tajada, candidate tete que si method la yendi.
So, the minimum wage, people have to remember, it's a minimum standard. This is an
minimum wage at any day. Tagondina tete que si candida carda down.
Proportion of the population and a young portion of the population that is making minimum wage. So, minimum wage is not the tool to get to a living wage. Thank you.
Minimum wage that is not a tete too long delay.
Questions, oral questions, written questions, returns for written questions, replies to Commissioner's address, petitions, reports of committees on the review of bills, reports of standing and special committees, tabling of documents.
Table of documents, Member Tabacha. Mr. Speaker, the do la taganyo sharing common grounds a casing. So more the data you contact policy got some tiny day May 2014 Zakia. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Sabacha. Tabling of documents. Tabling of documents. Notice is a motion. Notice is a motion. Motions. Motions. Notice is a motion for the first reading of bills. Notice is a motion for the first reading of bills. First reading of bills. First reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Consideration in committee of the whole.
Consideration in committee of the whole bills 23, 29, 38. Minister statements issue. Candidates table documents 561, 567, 578, 579. That's 19.2. Member Nivik Tunley, Dune Zhatıé. Masi.
What is the wish of committee?
Committee, Tagani there. Masi. The table document 516, 19.2. Got 22, 2023 got education, culture and plan, got justice. Masindi.
Thank you. Does committee agree?
Panaganazu.
You committee, we will take a short recess. And
Sawanatsu
Isini. I now call
committee back to order in la Nakikat the guide triple document -15, 19 to 2022, 23 decade. Ita do Department of Education, Culture and Employment City. Minister, see witness Nujenu Sani there. Masi.
Okay, Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses into the chamber. He's just running.
Sergeant at Arms, you witnesses in Ujeguni Zayanu. Nakakala budget gasiti.
Thank you. Welcome back, Deputy Minister McDonald and ADM Mr. Saturino.
Masi Jona Tanatindi. Tatukakala Kasiti or Didi Danasite. Do income security Kesi or Maokute da Kala 5 minutes Kagu send any income security.
You did? Okay. I just got to fix the clock. There. You ready? Member for Montfouille.
Montfouille. Income security class.
Saying about the income support, and okay, the Indigenous students, they're eligible for basic and supplementary, and there, I was saying that I said a lot of students are saying that the funding that they get, it's not enough.
Some budget what are his the Indigenous Garrison. Ita some bagoni jeketita ijiteki la kakoteti keta gozo keta ajiteki gonita jiketa gozo zentiageti. Ita nane la go asulendi.
Remissible loan, where they can pay half, because a lot of them live in outlying communities, in the small communities, and if they don't get a job right away, then what?
Kotagoda telezeke de koji kwen kotagoda telezeke lago tseleni de la tandiago zoke ndi jiteke.
They didn't even start their life, or it doesn't even have a job now right away at the beginning when they're just starting. Their credit is already ruined because of the collections. So a lot of them, is there any way that we can change that within the policy? Or
Santira la situle guliatele the policy zeke department zeke situ in Tadiquaganda.
Policy?
Thank you. Minister of Isini.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as we look at SFA and how we want to improve the program, we can look at things like that.
Tule sekozele zeke ni de come Tadiquaita tule yen. Come and I need the zeke here. The legislative zeke some by sea or the any day. Casinda metala son di candu catule magaitan.
To ensure that we are developing a program that is responsive to the needs and the circumstances of all residents, and if those residents are in small communities and they have different circumstances that require perhaps a different way of doing things, then we want to look at that. So I appreciate the member bringing it to my
Masi members the comment
thank you. Another one too is that there are some students that took because they use up their basic and supplementary grant, which is 12th semester and equivalent to $60,000. So some went on the because of that, they're not eligible for the remissible loan, so they have to go on the repayable loan. And some are saying that, well, some of the students or the people that I talked to, they're close to 60 years old, and they're saying, we don't have a job. Government is not going to do a write-off of that loan. They would like to see that write-off. Is there any way that can SFA or ECE review those outstanding?
Outstanding student loans la situle yego ECE ayen. Milita de son bataga go to agreement yan. The supplementary grant gayen.
Minister of ECE.
Thank you. And again, we do have to follow the rules in other financial legislation. So there are processes in place to
mega process that one the DTK Kandiji take cut continues on the one it's a go shatule. Kandio Guli Kashu program now Chinita Iji Kandiji Kazio. Ita Tuji Gainda.
Change the program so it's a little more responsive, but I don't want to commit to just treating some people differently because they have different circumstances.
She Tuji take Tue Magonete Kosia Edesia 20. Ita Jisia Roma and Daddy quite Handes on Yendi Masi.
Are there any further questions? Member for Montfouille, just wait.
Oh, my 5 minutes is up? Okay. Oops.
Thank you. Are there any further questions under income?
Kala the income security the case you see kala say go sa de shi ni den di. Ita katu do education, culture and security operations the kigatan da 2022-23 60,121,000 committee kanale so ita do ka
Labor, Development and Advanced Education, page 53 with information items on 54 to 57. Questions? Member for Hay River South.
Hay River South, page 57 zeke.
Looking at trades and occupation wage subsidy, can the minister, I guess, give me a breakdown roughly between the trades and I guess an occupation? I suspect it's two different things. What the breakdown would be? Thank you.
Thank you. So just for clarity, what's the question? The breakdown between what?
Member for Hay River South, did you want to clarify?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It just says that trades and occupation, so I expect that there's two different parts to it.
Thank you. Minister Vicini.
Thank you. They're not separated in the budget, but perhaps Mr. Saturnino can provide a bit of a description.
Mr. Salamino
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there are 54 designated trades and 25 occupations.
25 occupation is allowed the DZKU Mogundazi. Candias in land the legislative Zekani de. That is some but Zekani de ka the program is heat. Got any day the Candisi such in land.
River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd ask the Minister if the program is actually fully subscribed. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Vicini.
I believe so. Perhaps Mr. Saturnino can provide the breakdown on the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the past few years,
Mr. Saturnino, Yundi Tana de Gargota, Gulia Sita, Ijiki, the support North Asi in the Honda, is the Honda, the Hita, Gotachu, Asichu, Metata Titi, you can dinner at the program to the Gala Tayan.
Thank you, Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, since you opened it up, what's the uptake being with the third and fourth and women's in trade? Do you have any numbers or anything that you can provide us with? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask the Deputy Minister to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Minister McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As of now, that change, that data would be a little bit too new to be able to report. Of the current breakdown, there are 298 registered apprentices in the
298 registered apprentices. 44% la 44% la Indigenous is a Thai percent la Zeli is on the other Nidi Tayandi.
For Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And communicating, I guess, these changes to the, to businesses and people that may be interested in the trades or occupations. How was that achieved? Thank you.
Thank
you for some of the details. I'd like to hand it to Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you. Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did put out a news release at the end of January. In addition to that, we would use most of the normal
January ma loro kurati lease kaita ko jami target lease ke kantia gaitandi.
Social media. We also are communicating that directly to employers and making them aware through that way. And for those employers of that.
Amidita hegala ki tete ke si ya di ko zan dia sita kandi kantia le.
Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is any of this communicated to the schools? Because, we are talking about trades, I guess, say specifically, just to give an option to people instead of going post-secondary route. Thank you, Madam Chair.
With the career and education advisors that are quite recent positions at ECE, they have been communicating this type of information with schools. We have some people on that team that have trades experience, and they've really been champions of this.
Kandi region ko tega la gite je ke isi kau kandi sio ko te kadi tiane ita ka te onze atu ligeni de kandi si gaitan kandi ne so tule ne junior ti ati di te kwenza je di je ke isi wani masini.
Thank you. Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm pleased to see that, that this is expanded to third and fourth years and also to women in trades. I think it's, it's so important with the amount of work and the houses that we need in the territories and other things as well. So, subscribe now, and I'd look to I'd like to see us throw more money at it at some.
I just want to go to
the workforce development agreement, and I just ask the minister, maybe give me an idea of what that really is, and it's grants, so
Minister,
Thank you, Minister of ECE.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a large list of recipients here, so perhaps for more.
Thank
you, Madam Chair. The Workforce Development Agreement provides supports.
Solandi kandi workforce chi kutata di program ji se la ji ze ke. Tane thade te zo de ko. Khade di te ga self employment no te ni de khanju ko ga ko tane te ze ke khandi mesela. Ha de di.
In 2020-2021
2020-2021 ze ke ji ga nda ni de ka asi so mesela li di ze ke ji ga.
Those programs.
The programs
third-party funding contributions. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Line item literacy funding. One thing that I noticed, being in business is that you do get a number of people that, that can't read or write that well. And one thing we tried to do was, to provide them with a few hours a day or a week to, and pay them for that to and to take some courses or have somebody tutor them, and there's always a cost associated with that. Is that something the department provides funding for above the wage and occupation subsidies? Thank you.
Application subsidy la hilaka county ko chan di lian.
The workforce development agreement could help out with, but I'm really not sure, so I'll ask Mr. McDonald. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Minister McDonald.
Deputy Minister McDonald. Madam Chair, the Zeke Somba Zeke Gani de ECEC Kandisi contribution agreement that got in the third party Zeke. The Azonze Kakondia go to go to India. That dagger la Zeke is la car, I see goes anything let's honor that talk on the other.
For delivery of training and things of that nature. So there are a host of different ways in which we.
Madam Chair, yeah, just one quick question is that I'd like to know, I guess, what the uptake is in the communities outside Yellowknife and like.
You wanna go Tayago la Yellowknife wanna get la down the subsidies.
Minister of ECNE.
Thank you. There's a pretty good uptake across the territory. I'm not sure if there's a regional breakdown that departmental officials might have. I'll send it to Mr. McDonald. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Minister McDonald.
Okay, I'm just looking through my notes if you have a second.
Just provide that to us in writing, if that's fine. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Labor Development and Advanced Education. Member for Tabacha.
Tabacha.
I just have a couple of questions for the minister. One of them is about financial assistance to medical students. Is there any financial assistance to medical students after 4 years? You know, because I had a constituent from Fort Smith who is going to be a surgeon, and she had a lot of problems in the last couple of years getting financial assistance for graduating. Will try to get a job at Stanton. That's her ideal situation, and so I'm just wondering, do you have those? They had those programs years ago because we used to hear about it, but we don't hear much.
Thank
you. Minister of ECNE.
Thank you. So after the 12 semesters of SFA, we have loans available, and I know that there's also.
Kandio di tule yagagan da yagana tandene zuti kuwago tane tezeke wadi indisi di kone zutane kyo dizeke ijugu liand.
So you do have to pay that back, but you know.
Sombagoni jeni de kaketa go zozendi jizeke sia. Ita dizeke ga indani de moda tionde ita okizeke ande.
But there is a number of other avenues, and some of those avenues you do have to pay back. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Further to that answer, I still feel that we pay a lot of money to locums that they're not guaranteed residents of the Northwest Territories. Every community does. And when we have someone who is of Indigenous descent and who is a Métis person and going in to be I don't know if she is going to graduate and with honors from the University of Saskatchewan, and is going to be a surgeon, and who's willing to come here. You're telling me that she has to go get lines of credits and that are payable back, and yet we're putting all these other students through school, and you're not getting the surgeon or a doctor, and that kind of is we have to start thinking out of the box and look after the people. It's because we have such a shortage of doctors and.
Tu na ti go rong, di si gua ga te kia yin ta ti zu ta go, kan di zu ta go ai tene te ze ke ga la dang dia go zao di yin.
Minister Vicini.
Thank you. So the SFA program is, it provides basic funding for university students.
La university students ke ga go zan diang de di song ba ze ke si department ju ka.
EC provides additional bursaries for people going into certain, or studying certain fields, but that's not something that SFA is doing at this point. I mean, we could look into it, but as people who move up from the south and work for a few years and then head back down, and then someone else cycles up, because we really are lacking a lot of qualifications in the territory. So it's hard to say yes for this and perhaps no for other things. And perhaps they can have some targeted measures to do that, but our program is more general in nature. I'm very sympathetic to what the member is saying. We do need more doctors, but the program at this point is a general studies program. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to switch around now to the commitment of Indigenous languages, and I want to ask the Minister if there is going to be an interpreter language translator course in a 2-year diploma or a 4-year program with a degree in the future.
Thank you. Yes, there is work, and this is under the budget of a previous section, but there is work towards developing a languages program.
Thank you. Member for Tabacha.
Could this, Madam Chair, could this also be cross-referenced with the teacher education program? Because it would be nice that the teachers that would graduate from the teacher education program also have access to some of the courses that would be offered in the language translator.
The teacher education program.
Thank you, and I think the idea right now is to have this 2-year course, and perhaps it could lead to another Bachelor of Education degree after another 2 years, but I think that's a little too far off in the future for me to say one way or making its own decisions without influence from the minister in terms of the programming, but I'm on the same wavelength as the member. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Tabacha.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Great Slavey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the
Great Slavey.
I note there was and it's quite small, but it's important to me. I've been a Power Up mentor before for the programs, and I think they do a lot of really great work. I know it's been a struggle for them during COVID because a lot of their stuff is going into schools and dealing with children and youth, and not being able to do so has been hard. So I guess my first question is, the extra 20,000 or 21,000 that was there in the 2020-21 actuals, was that a COVID bump up?
Ji somba zekela di COVID zekelo the minister situle go kayati the 2021-2020 zekeja.
Help the trades programs in our smaller communities where maybe they can't travel to, say, a workshop or
Ji ke te zeke ta kandi uga go de te zeke ya situle kandi ani ze chuyen.
So as for that, the $20,000 difference, I will pass it over, but we do fund Skills Canada.
Ji zekela di 70,000 na kogani Tambour da di zeke. Because 85,000 is labor market zeke. Ita ka member that in the ka din di ko ta tin le za ta din di ko mekanita za ko di somba zeke wan di siyo.
Some more of the detail I can ask Mr. McDonald. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Minister MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe for the 2021 year for Skills Canada, we were
2021 zeke si la ka somba si la sa meta dia si la the federal zeke si somba nigini la zi hon down.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Great Slave.
Yeah, and that's what I thought it probably was. Again, I know it's a small line item, but definitely one that I think is important. I may have this a little bit mixed up, so maybe I'll just ask for an explanation. But with this language proficiency testing, is this the testing that immigrants or people coming to the Northwest Territories that are going through the immigration process need to take? Their English.
Immigrant to the Gotland did get the Honda language policy testing needs new 46 directly.
Yes, that is the language. That is, as the member described it, it is offered here, provided by Collège Nordique. Perhaps on how that is funded, because I know that we did provide it. Applications for this program were dealt with. I can ask Mr. Saturnino for some.
Application that's a
Mr. Santorino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have entered into a 3-year agreement with Collège Nordique Francophone to offer the self-pip.
The Tarai was AC Coseni Tani Tota 46,000 on the do Galatati Morati Zekezi.
So it's buried within the labor market programs budget line. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Great Slave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I'm going to maybe make the advice that any of these campaign schools being run include some accounting training in them, because it is really hard sometimes for us to figure out where the money has gone. So I'm glad to hear that it hasn't disappeared, and I just want to confirm that now means that test can be offered here in the north, and they do not have to travel. And I see the Deputy Minister and Minister nodding their heads yes, so that's great, because I have heard that has been a problem in the past. I guess the next one I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about, so I'm not duplicating too much, is the Small Community Employment Fund. I do see that we have more money here than we did in the 2020-21 actuals, which is great. Again, I feel that this is a great way to get employment and money into small communities and into the hands of our residents.
Ecology did get some by Dharmatal, the other mechanism Lasi, Kanezu is the Kiasitum Kayantian.
So I'm not aware of any plans to increase it at this point, but it is a very, I think it's a successful program. I like programs like this where they're community driven and, local communities or businesses.
The Kota the business that Kazi Kandias in London.
Resources in order to inform the future.
Digital resource line della situle yona ze kati khandia me kyuri chwa tule ji ya ga se la chi ze ke yen Minister ayanti la kondi long kandi different departments ati. Ijita mo kandi aron legalagan tata kandi si senigi aande.
The Minister to explain. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Minister McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the small community employment item is a mandate item for this Assembly. So with that in mind, there is an interdepartmental working group that works to.
The working group can dia legalagan the small community employment case in yogi a tueta kondigo o the case. Kandi ne zon tata zuko tsana sia tuleyan.
Inventorying of programs. There's been the development of a new resource to provide to communities about the various opportunities. Mapping to look at programs and how they can be improved, combined, things of that nature. It's my understanding, well, I should say that ITI as well as ECE are co-leads on that. So with reference to some of the regional economic development planning, that information is being utilized by ITI in that context. So I think the plan is to provide a bit of an update on that item shortly in the coming days. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Great Slavey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. And I've heard earlier today already some talk about women in trades, etc. I guess when it comes around to these economic plans, you know, when I was first starting to run for this Assembly, I heard about ridings where, you know, no women had ever put their name forward before, or, you know, being told that there'd never be women elected there. And so I guess, given that it would be community leadership that's sort of running these programs and designating, what's being done to kind of ensure that the gender voice or the gender lens is also being looked at, as we somewhat have a bit of a patriarchal history in the North, and if the leadership, you know, we've lost one of our great female leaders to the Assembly from one of the Indigenous organizations. So I would be concerned that maybe that voice isn't maybe always reaching regional leadership, and how does the department ensure that it is? Thank you.
Department la tikandi ze kende la siko kresto ze kewa ze khatiyan.
Thank you. And so these are, the member is correct, these are community-driven decisions.
Minister tila ja ko ta ze keti dia ko ta khareta ko ze dikte ta khareta shaketini.
Touching on you know, something that is very difficult for us to get at through a program like this. That's why, you know, even with the Women in Trades subsidy, for the trades and occupational wage subsidy, increasing it for employers who employ women in trades. That was an area where we had money, and we thought we can put it towards this, but even that doesn't get at really the root cause. So I don't really have a good answer on this one. This really is a community-driven program, and we are responsive to the communities, and that's where decisions are made. I'm not sure if, I don't think the Deputy Minister has anything to add either, so thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Great Slavey.
Yeah, I don't know that I blame the Deputy Minister, and I am trying to be respectful in how I phrase this, having, obviously, there's no secret to anybody that, you know, where my passion lies for women and representation. So, you know, I think just being live to it is probably a big concern. And then I guess my other suggestion would be that there's some way to engage with small community, with women in small communities, and perhaps that's, you know, something to look at a different minister for, but, you know, having maybe some specific female focus. And again, I guess I shouldn't even say female or women, in that it should also be people that are not gender conforming, or there's the binary and the spectrum. So, you know, more of a comment, but I would like to see some sort of input to the department on these programs from that sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Member for Montfouille.
Montfouille.
Thank you. I'll be mindful of that time today. Yeah, trades and occupation wage subsidy. Can you give us a breakdown of the success rates?
Region the trades occupation wage subsidy iron.
Minister Vicini.
Thank you. So we might be able to provide some information on where that money was distributed to.
No teni te katule 这你等大概这个西国的搞的这个是国的一样的，一大的这个你等到等你提倡这卡里底下对嘞。
There are some issues there, but noting that Sichuan region is not part of the North Slave, I will see if we have a.
Sichuan region lucky North Slave 挂个地嘞，大一这个来当地才来些，们大的挂带些。
Thank you. Oh, just wait. Did you want me to pass it? Deputy Minister McDonald? He's going to fill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really appreciate the opportunity. I do have a list of.
一这个从巴西来看，那我看地嘞呢，这看的是，第这个是我。
Some examples, Arctic Canada Construction, Fort Simpson Housing Authority, Inuvialuit Development Corporation. So it really is a fairly comprehensive and wide-ranging list of Indigenous governments and organizations, private sector across the territory. Thank you, Madam Chair.
加上了 private sector 呢，在个领地这样说，这才老的样的。
If we can get a list or a breakdown for her region, that would be great. I think that's what she's asking. Thank you. Member from Montfouet, did you have further questions?
Yes, thank you. Career development and training. The number is really low in this one. It says 30. Well, there was nothing in 2021. I think we know why, but.
Career development training
in many of the small communities, because there's career development, a lot of people benefit from this position. So I'm just wondering why it's low.
Thank you. Minister Vicini.
Thank you. Well, in fairness, most of this $44 million is for career development and training in one way or another. But for that specific item, I can ask Mr. Saturnino to chime in. Thank you.
The private sector 家庭，国家真的在这个数，样的，他30,000的是啦。You ka program in
the 2020-2021, we're not actually did not deliver a number of programs. However, the funding still remains there, and we use it typically for supporting participant costs, where the majority of their programs.
Are there other members who wish to ask questions on labor development and advanced education? Seeing none, members please turn to page 54. Education, Culture and Employment, Labor Development and Advanced Education, Operation Expenditure Summary.
The Operation Expenditure Summary, the 54,267 bandidos
information items on page 58 through 64. Did the minister wish to switch out witnesses?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And for the record, it's been Mr. Michael Saturnino who's been here, and I'd like to switch him out for Mr. Sam Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, can you please escort the witness out and the new witness in?
Sergeant Arms, escort witness out to the Fiscal in the message.
Welcome back, Mr. Shannon.
Do education, culture, employment education medal.
Page 54 to 64. Does any members have any questions in regards to any of those?
Members, education was how to see anything. Family.
Thanks, Madam Chair. On page 58 is the Students' Loan Fund, and You know, I guess I'd like to ask, during the COVID pandemic of the last couple of years, I had heard that some
the student loan fund out the education da is the student is the education class ke jaga ile the COVID je oneta yamaga danes hita
or extension to, you know, student eligibility periods or anything like that has been, or were loan payments put on pause or whatever. What accommodation was made during the pandemic with regard to
pandemic go chala down the to go out the student financial assistance ke garsin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in the early days of the pandemic, yes, student loan payments were put on, repayments were put on pause. Students were continued to be funded even if they had, you know, there was issues with their. In this last fiscal year, though, I don't believe there have been any additional measures such as that. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks to the Minister for that. As I understand it, students have sort of a period of time in which they are eligible once they start a program, and is the Minister willing to look at providing some flexibility in terms of eligibility for students if they lost a year or two during COVID? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member.
Minister di la Kamera Kandi program Gundi Kandi go out di ke gani de ta Kandi si la ka a sin method la ji ke si ga tandi go out di ke ni de na ne le ra me go ta ze go tandi o de si ke.
And this is, you know, we don't want to start making exceptions for students who, I guess, knew that, you know, there was not a possibility that things could go online. You know, in a lot of cases, people knew what they were getting in for. I don't want to sound, you know, discompassionate, but we are not looking at making any sort of taking any of the measures the member is speaking of. Thank you.
Thanks.
I love Hay River, but I'm from Yellowknife. But thanks, Madam Chair. Can the Minister tell us whether any other jurisdictions have looked at, in Canada, have looked at providing some flexibility in terms of student eligibility for financial assistance, given COVID? Post-secondary education students. Thanks, Madam Chair.
We shouldn't
have sent Mr. Saturnino away. So I don't have that information. We can provide some information back to the member, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for France.
Madam Chair, and thanks to the Minister for that. So can the Minister just, not having been a post-secondary education or a student for many years, what is the process if somebody needs or wants to get some an exception or extra consideration? Do they write to their their SFA officer and get some sort of waiver, or how does that process?
The post-secondary education
Thank you. So most exceptions are really tied to medical issues. So a student has a medical issue, and they would call their SFA, the SFA officer, their SFA contact person. That would be the first point of contact. And if the member would like, we can provide information on what that process might look like. Thank you.
The process
Yeah, I'd like to get that information from the Minister, and I think or some other MLAs would be interested.
I
The minister's putting that together. Could he also put together statistics in terms of how many were granted?
Number
of students that have, and if that, we have an increasing number over the last couple of years and more of them are getting rejected, that's grounds for changing the eligibility requirements or providing for.
The COVID
Well, thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Minister Vicini.
Thank you. So there's a lot of work going on right now with the SFA program review.
The program
that if that's the information that's being requested, though, we can redirect staff efforts towards that and see what we can put together. But I'm not sure that the members are going to get an accurate a view, perhaps, of what he's looking for. If someone calls their SFA. Thing that is within the regulations or within the ability of the officer. I'm not sure if there's a process to log that and track that. So we can see what we can do, but I'm not sure it's going to be everything the member hopes it will.
Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And not knowing enough about the system and how it works and whether statistics are tracked or not, I'm happy to get whatever the minister can provide, and then we'll go from there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay. Are there any further questions on the information items? Member for Tabacha.
Just have a couple of short questions, Madam Chair. On page 58, what is the Northern bonus? I'd like the minister to answer that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Minister Vicini.
Northern bonus la yendi. That minister is your Northwest Territories students
It depends on where you live. You are eligible for different amounts each year. I believe that comes into effect. I know that if you live in Hay River, you can get $2,000 a year, up to a maximum of $10,000. Thank you. And that goes towards repayment of your loan. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Tabacha.
$43,000. Was there a program that was let go, or how did they come to that figure? Thank you, Madam Chair.
These numbers are based on the funding formula, our best estimates.
The number formula is around
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's based on a formula. So the formula is.
That formula program capital.
Thank you, Minister Vicini.
Thank you, and I apologize. I realized how inadequate my answer was as soon as I said it. So the funding formula takes into account many things, but the biggest driver is enrollment. And so generally, the more students you have, the more money you get, and the less students you have, the less money you get. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
The statistics that came out, we had about 11%, 294 people that decrease in our population count in the community of Fort Smith. And I'm always much about education, and I want to ensure that the level of funds and education is.
program ihtiyatin lani Dene Zhatıé asil loka kaç di diu ki gago de di pandemic di honeta yidan warisi ita yite ke ni de la ka mo ne zunyu di azgon ta si kan de ga le si ka gucha yite ke da warisi ita magazan dande ne zuande
Of Fort Smith. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member. And if there's no further questions, any other questions under the information items from members? Oh, member for Tune-a-Day-Wolladay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 59, I'm just curious in regards to the school in Deta. I don't have the capital plan in front of me, but I would like to ask the minister where in the capital plan is they're planning to build a new school in Deta. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Speaker. Madam Speaker, that the Kamagogut in the
We went through capital in the fall, yeah, but if I mean, if you want to give a response, if you know any information on anything that's going on, I'll give the Minister of EC&E.
Thank you. So I can speak briefly to this. There isn't a plan. There's no plan for a new school in Deta.
Kala dislekwe koni hosiago or the Deta 49 school order do Tajonkotlin day. Ta yenagini zerati dislekwe the kesi konezugo anite itaji the kesi gaita ta candidati dislekwe the kesi kokonio secha
Community, it sounds like there were commitments they were aware of from years ago about a new school, but the fact is the school is still in good enough shape that it's not slated to be replaced at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had other questions in the capital plan, but I'll do it another time, I guess. I'm going to go to page 60. In the authority allocation, it talks about full-time positions. Here we got 1,047 positions. I'd like to ask a question in regards to the minister in terms of what percentage is Northerners, Southerners, and Indigenous. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank
you. I will say that these numbers here don't actually reflect the actual numbers of people employed. These numbers reflect the positions that are funded by ECE. But
the ECE somba nigenila. Ta si closet school boards are really catching the somba zeke.
They have a principle, but there is a lot of flexibility. I can get that information in terms of the number of Northern, or at least Indigenous teachers for the member. We did provide that to the House. I will also say that Yellowknife Catholic School Board and YK1 do not keep affirmative action stats, and so the largest number of our teachers, we don't know whether or not they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. Thank you.
Just wait for his reply on this that statement that was made in the House here. I have other questions, but I can wait another day on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so with the information item pages, does anybody else have any questions? Seeing no further questions, we'll now return to the departmental summary found on page 29. Education, culture, and employment.
Education, culture, employment, the Tanete son Patagala Gite, the 2022, the Magadanta, met 358,380 Kanalism. Masi, this is Casey Laka, education, culture, and employment, Sikatu, Mewa, and at the end, the Masi, Mr. Raliati.
Motion is in order. Question has been called.
Questions indeed are wrong enough, eh?
All those opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you. So thank you, Minister.
Masi Minister, because the witness you must see. Sergeant Arm, if you witness the see your chamber dark colors, because the tower not the regime.
I now call Committee of the Whole back to order. Committee, we've agreed to consider table document 561-19, 2 main estimates 2022-2023. Does the Minister of Justice have any opening remarks?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here today to present the Department of Justice's main estimates for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Overall, the department
$3.3 million to see 2.5%, 21-22 the main estimate. This case la the candidate kala kago the GNWT the case da handiade. Agent the case magagan rani de 252,000 SC. One court officer got a legal aid the disclosure position. Moze la the Territorial Police Service Agreement the Kegasa. That is the Besha Konji who key the constable got a here talk to Yaktak. 809,000 SC the RCMP members got 390,000 SC. Is issued to Internet Child Exploitation Unit of RCMP. It's like 190,000. You see the legal officer position. Because they go on 1.8 million. You see it's like a collective agreement increase on it. It's a dead 160,000. Sunset the 820,000. The estimate is the 19 Legislative Assembly gets down the budget 2022. The Legala and Dani de Nezuna Hego or the Zekesia. Masi is Thank
you, Minister. Do you wish to bring witnesses into the House?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses.
Sergeant at Arms, witnesses in the
Minister, please introduce.
Minister, I'm going to go to the end.
Welcome. Committee has agreed to forego general comments. Does the committee agree to proceed to the detailed in the contained table document? Committee, we will defer the departmental summary and review the estimates.
Megazunda, the activity, that do page 279, Azunda, with the information is at 280 and 281.
280 and 281.
Titlego sa the scene then.
Are there any questions? Member for Yellowknife North.
Yellowknife North. Ji somebody ki sele ji te ke gatanda aji on the community justice committee got the project te ke gatasin.
Thank you. Minister of ECNE.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Mr. Bancroft to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bancroft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the downturn there that you see in the 2020-2021 actuals is actually in response to communities struggling to operate certain programmings during the COVID pandemic. We offered a lot of different options to those communities of altering the delivery of those programs, but ultimately some of the programs weren't able to be expanded.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the Minister have an update on whether all of our community justice committees are up and operating? And thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Not every community has a community justice committee, but those that do, I believe are operating. Some are operating at a higher capacity than others. I'm not sure if Deputy Minister has more information.
There
are 26 communities with funding agreements in place and another
26 cent got a 5 agreement chukala that's it me was the Fort McPherson for Good Hope te kesio.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would just, I think these community justice committees are just a long way away from where we would like them to be.
Justice Committee, Otiagit is a Kegasi, I get you liko kagondile, Jidawades.
Even here in Yellowknife, when there's been times where you've been unable to divert files because the Community Justice Committee just is not operating. And I think this is an area where we really could be a leader. There is sentence.
It's a sitting line Dene Zhatıé said the Justice Committee is a case here. He owns on the it's a case to live and that quite a more to lily it's a case on but a kegani then.
In the right direction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister of Minister of Justice.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned before,
the Justice Committee see that Sanatega Dashu Ka Ajitake Itekesi Ka Etekage Dida Etetake di Dion the Ditekesia. You can't diagazan down the D. Kandi Seni as a Tizeke Ganide. Ka Kagoti, come Dicho. Ita Kandigo Ka Etlete on the La Jokotake City.
Being said, I understand what the member is saying, and in many ways.
Remember that the common curation. He take Leani de do Gone Zunutini or Lico Cagondile, Rome Garden at Tata and is on Casaleatulin.
Minister to expand. Thank you.
Thank you,
Deputy Minister in the end. Mercy, Madam Chair. Do is it a Kelaki? Review na Hetzeleko, Katuum and Daddy quite Tajiteke then.
Each community has different capacities, and we have 20.
Taisi goodly iron the auction that's a Tazeki. Justice Committee Yagun Lidaron, a set they go at you on the Legidawades.
Any butte. We do work with the community justice committees and their coordinators to provide training, and even during the pandemic, we've done some individual training and webinar opportunities through Alberta Restorative Justice, Crisis and Trauma, Canadian Domestic Homicide, and Canadian Restorative Justice, and the International Institute for Restorative Practices. So we are trying to build capacity, but there is burnout in some of the communities. Or, you know, some of the volunteers are often
Doing a
review and, of course, trying to improve our programs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Just a reminder to slow down a little bit for the interpreters. They're still with us. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this is in need of a review, and I like the idea of.
Dila mego te tani te ne zuline se review in lane. Tiko tako da tel da yagun ni da ko tako di chat ke ji ga ko la. Ijita ore si sandida me katane toni de ne zuwa. Alberta get dige.
Weeks on the land programming. They run really elaborate diversion programming that I just don't think any one of our one community programs could run. So in doing that, have we looked at perhaps creating a higher territorial-wide alternative justice or diversion committee? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
But
we do have the Wellness Court and the Domestic Violence Treatment Options Court, so there are some other options, but no, we don't have a super committee in mind for.
Thank you,
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I note that this is the area where money that is provided to the YWCA is for the, I believe, the emergency protection orders, and that is what they're meant by as designate under the Act. This number stayed the same, and I get that this is one area that must be quite difficult to forecast, but given everything that we've been hearing about the pandemic and the effects on the domestic violence situations and mental health, do we anticipate that we're going to need to have more money here? Do we know if the YWCA is busier than they have been before? What sort of analysis and work is being done around that?
The YWCA la rania mentali quati entirely to your life to candio, Diajon Tete Mora di Juarezin.
Have information on how many EPOs have.
Kamera Gondina hits and Jiteke Megokai and Jiteke. Candigo Etanti Tekion Teisila, the Deputy Minister who you the Shazondin.
Minister Doolittle.
Madam Chair. So I believe we're all familiar with, there was a, we contracted the YWCA. EPOs are a tool, Madam Chair, and not the only tool. They're intended, we also look at, they're not intended to be the only tool. We also look at safety planning as well. Over the 2021 year, 100 cases were filed, and 89 of those cases were judicially confirmed. So far in 21-22, the YWCA has submitted a total of 69 EPO applications, which have all been judicially confirmed. So on target, maybe a little under actually compared to the previous.
Chair, this is one where, though, it's hard to say that just, because maybe a number is a little less, or that doesn't mean that things aren't happening behind the scenes and just aren't being reported. As people are not socializing outside the home so much, there's probably less opportunities for them to have conversations with friends and family, to maybe identify and be encouraged to go. I think everyone's aware of my situation in this last week, and I have been reached out to by the RCMP and by being offered victim services. It took me a bit to realize what had happened to me was something that actually needs to be reported and talked about, etc. So I feel that there are many that maybe don't realize that they're in a situation where they need help. So If the YWCA were to express that there is more of a need here, and perhaps not necessarily just around the EPOs, but in general, is there more money available to provide them?
Mr.
Justice.
Thank you. So in addition to the YWCA and as
the YWCA 시작해 membership 가요 고인데 이제 괜히 대카 굴리하고서 이제 아니 대카면 뭐나 제카서 뒤고서 매가 손바고티 아즈고
one area. In terms of this, the funding, there isn't a plan in this fiscal year to increase it. I'm not sure if the Deputy Minister has anything to add on that one. I don't think she does, but there's no doubt that this is a serious issue, and as we develop and implement the missing.
디카툴레 지하철 레손 디코디 메체 판지가 있다라딘데 유가 있다서고 당디아서 레제케 하죠. 메가 손바디 키아도 가서 레가니데 유가 메세니 야이티아서고인데.
Thank you. Member for Great Slate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I should probably know this, but if we don't have some of that work that the department has been doing around the victim services and the action plans coming out of that, I would really like to see that information. I'm a big
이제게 메곤 디에제게 지가 한다네 세야 시트를 요거 세책하게 디가 시트에서 가게 주연.
Be obviously providing a lot of feedback to the department. I guess my next question or my next category I just wanted to talk about was the guns and gang strategy. I'm really happy to see an increase in funding here, but one thing I do hear is that it perhaps is not enough. We have a crack epidemic in our territory, and that has been largely due to the infiltration of gangs. It is my understanding that the jail itself has now, or the corrections program itself, has become somewhat of a way for infiltration as gang members from the south are incarcerated with Northerners. They are able to then influence and permeate into our communities. I guess maybe I can ask, do we expect that in the next several years that this funding will increase?
Tila sonbate kesin federal money teke na jati in program teke dita shitian dia shitu se tekatien.
To the members' earlier comment, there is a victims services review, and that has been provided.
Jita tu imokaya ne tise kesi sume goita tu kotame kesu konti song mesa lande ta tian de teke ani dia ya federal government teke son band.
But enhancing this funding, so there is all of the provinces and territories that are putting pressure on the federal government because they do see the need to enhance this. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Great Slave.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions under community justice? Member for Frame Lake.
Frame Lake.
Madam Chair, I think this is where the integrated case management program is found, but there's no line item, there's nothing. It's hard to know what expenditures there are on the program. Can I get some detail about that and whether the budget is increasing, decreasing? Thanks.
The budget last year down the more dian de tau in le tau kim yuan de tau kim more that the towers.
So we have one associated position, and that position helps coordinate with other departments, but the ISD program, or ISD, Integrated Service Delivery, is more than just a position or a program. It's an approach that not just Justice is implementing, but we are trying to implement across.
Deputy Minister
program has a 22-23 annual operating budget of $830,000, the majority of which is dedicated.
830,000 the Pathfinder's position issue on the end.
Thank you. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks. And any changes then from last year? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. changes from last year. I'll hand it to the Deputy Minister. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Minister Doolittle.
See, Madam Chair, there were collective agreement increases. That's
For that, Madam Chair, and thanks to the Minister and his staff. Can we get that split out somehow in next year's main estimates? Like, we're spending $6 million on community justice, and it's like 2 lines in the program detail. Community justice is a big
6 million givet the community justice, 5.2 million is Uganda. Situle na je cutting the down the Masi.
Thank you, and I used to express the same frustration about the $165 million one line in ECE's budget, so I understand where the member's coming from. I'll work with the department and with finance, but there could be rules related to how this is organized that are
Down the finance got larger land. Can't you car?
For Frame Lake.
No, thanks. I appreciate that commitment from the Minister. And I think that subject's going to come up in one of the other activities that we're going to get to. But on an integrated case management, I understand that this is a program that's largely centered in Yellowknife. And I think a while back we did have a return on social investment study that was done that was very complimentary of the program and the assistance that it offers to the clients. Very successful. Are there any plans to expand this program outside of Yellowknife, perhaps into?
Yellowknife only get the program the
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no plans to expand the program as is. It is a Yellowknife program right now, and it is.
Yellowknife program out. Kotse saneni de ka kotatse kezeniti leani de ka megadana tagada sitliazon merosa ka gutiazon kotatse kezi dandigwa get indendi.
Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would hope that the Minister would be a little more flexible there. Look, you can't transplant what is being done here to regional centers, but there's lots of lessons learned. And somehow that's going to roll out across the Northwest Territories. Is that what I'm hearing the Minister say? Thank you.
That's the dream, that we find ways of delivering services.
The service the Yellowknife got a Yellowknife only get the program
in Yellowknife, and it's very tailored to their needs in this community. We need an approach that's going to work everywhere. These one-off programs are great, but they don't. ICM is not going to transform how we deliver services. ISD is going to transform how we deliver services, and so that's the work that we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, I'm not going to hold my breath forever, but I look forward to some results. Thank you, and that's all I've got, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions under community justice? Member for Tabacha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Community Justice Committees and projects, when you look at the active positions, it says 2 in headquarters and 12 in North Slave, and yet it's covering, I'm sure this is also covering South Slave. Very confusing the way it's brought forward here. I think there are a Community Justice Committee in Fort Smith, and I want to say that the people that run the Community Justice Committee in Fort Smith is very productive, And I think that the way things are put forward by Justice is not very clear. Clarity must be when we're going to vote on this budget. I think clarity is very important, and I want to see if the minister agrees with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Comments I made earlier, yes, I've been saying that for years. Information and provide additional information to committee as requested. I wish this document was 10 times its size so we could have information about all of the programs. But the fact is that I have 2 binders here that together are probably 2 feet high, and that's only my 2 departments. So I'm happy to provide information as I can, but what is in the main estimates is what's there. Thank you.
The minister also says integrated services cannot be put into regional centers or communities, and that is very disturbing, because if that's the case and everything is just for one place, I'm considering voting against this budget, because I think it's high time. Very clearly that we're always doing this, and it's always for the same place, and I don't take anything from. With that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Thank you, and just to correct the record, I never said integrated services cannot be put into communities outside of Yellowknife. I said integrated services can be put into communities outside of the Yellowknife, and that's exactly what we're working on. Have a clientele, or integrated service delivery is you have a clientele and you cater to them. What are their needs? And so I can't put a program to cater. Client service agreement is community justice now is working in Yellowknife, and we learn from it, and we are learning from it, but there's still a ways to go. We're trying to integrate the entire GNWT. Program roll this out elsewhere. So yes, we need to have integrated service delivery in all communities. This ICM program as it is, I don't see it rolling out outside of Yellowknife. That doesn't mean something else doesn't happen though. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Tabacha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the community justice committees and projects, could you give us the allocation by community, please? Thank you.
The community justice programs.
So the community justice committees, Hamlet of Aklavik receives $53,000. Anuva Community Justice Committee receives $129,500. Fort McPherson receives $82,000. Paulituck receives $45,000. Sigachik $41,500. Tuck $56,000. Ulahuktuk $56,000. Colville Lake $41,500. Delaney $75,000. Norman Wells $56,000. Toledo $49,000. Fort Smith $71,000. Fort Providence $53,000. Fort Resolution $49,000. Hay River $78,500. Katlodichi First Nation $45,000. Kakiza $41,500. Enterprise $20,000. Fort Simpson $63,000. Wrigley $41,000. Fort Liard $49,000. Sambake $41,000. Betchico $78,000. Gamity $40,000. Wekwati $40,000. Wati $45,000. Witzel K $45,000. Yellowknife, $129,000, Dene Zhatıé, $45,000. Thank you.
这种是拉康的算把的他自己拉到康的或者你拉的人。
For our Indigenous people of the North. It keeps them from getting, it's alternative justice, and it keeps them out of getting a criminal record. This is a really important line in the overall file on justice. And with those numbers, it's very little. So the alternative to that for Indigenous people.
Making sure
that our communities are funded properly so that our Indigenous people and people who get into problems for the first time there's a different alternative. And I look forward to change in the future on that. And
the community justice again, Dagu Liatin Ladi, the Zuayun Dago, Ministry Quakadin, the Dagu Liatin, the case you.
Keeping our, so that our Indigenous and others don't get a criminal record and don't use the other alternative of having to be incarcerated by the RCMP and the justice system. Do you agree with that, Minister? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Thank you. Yes, that's my goal. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions under community justice? Please turn to page 279. Justice, community justice.
Community Justice Operations Summary 2022-2023 $6,168,000. Community Canada
To corrections, beginning on page 283 with information items on 284 and 285. Questions from members?
Corrections about North.
We're spending about $40 million on corrections here under. Can I just get an explanation of what the difference between community corrections is and corrections administration and facilities? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Services, we have
probation services, correctional technology.
The breakdown for Corrections Administration is the headquarters of Corrections Service, as well as the training fund for
Correctional Service. Correctional Administration.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During, I believe it was the capital budget, we were talking, and our corrections are at an all-time low. Part of this is we suspect due to COVID and the courts have been shut down, but also just a number of other factors. I was just wondering if the Minister had an update of whether we're seeing any trend that the number of inmates is.
Justice.
Thank you. Since the last update I gave the House, the number has remained relatively stagnant. The last number I saw last week was somewhere around 75 inmates in the entire system. I suspect it's somewhere close to that, between 75 and 80 today.
75 and 80
The discussion around, is this a trend? Is this something that we can expect to see for years to come, or will we see numbers go back up? Is something that we are looking into. It wasn't that long ago when all of the correctional facilities were full, bursting at the seams. And now we have the exact opposite issue. So and go from there. So I'm not sure if the Deputy Minister has anything to add. Yeah.
Yes,
the total count today is 74 for adults, the physical count, and the total physical count for youth today is 3. So that's 32% of the adult count and 12% of the youth capacity. So, and the Minister is correct. There's a
32% on the 12% to that. Can't do more than that. Minister,
we will have to make some assumptions, on why this is happening, but that work has started, and it is a little too soon, we feel, to anticipate.
Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if we could get a breakdown of how many would be in the Hay River Men's Facility, Fort Smith Men's Facility, and North Slavey Men's Facility. Thank you.
North Slavey, Fort Smith, the facilities
Yes, I can get that for the member momentarily here. So in NSCC there are
53 SMTC 9 got the Tamachate got it's a D.
Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll just make some comments here. Scotland, going to go step out a little. Scotland passed a presumption against short sentences of 3 months. They just said it didn't make sense to jail people for that long. They lose employment, they lose housing. And that was so successful, they actually made it for a sentence of less than a year. They just don't put people in jail for less than a year. They use probation, alternative measures, treatment, whatever else. And I think, if we did that, we would have no one left in prison. Anyone over 2 years in the Northwest Territories goes to federal prison. And I'll just note, when we go back to the community justice committees, I just really believe when I look at the $40 million we're spending on corrections, with a concerted effort, we could put that into diversion, and we could basically empty out our jails and be leaders in this. So I know we're doing a review of the numbers and what they look like.
Quand Dieu a rendu que gagné des calamouches d'argent dit que si sont pas que what mais t'as que ya si t'as des candidates si me voyait t'as des gars y t'as que what is
what we want. So I'll leave that as a comment for the minister. As
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Thank you. So the majority of the people in the facilities are remanded, so they haven't been sentenced. So there would, unless no one gets remanded, then we would still have a requirement for a facility. And I hear what the member is saying as well. There's also consideration about victims. Sometimes the victim.
Remember that the medicine, the the
But that being said, I hear the member's concerns, and I think he's an idealist, and that's we need some idealists always bringing those ideas forward. And I think that I would like to keep the numbers low, the lower the better. So I will continue to work down that path, and I think that that desire is shared by the department.
Are there any further questions under corrections? Member for Frame Lake.
Frame Lake.
Chair, yeah, again, we've got like 3 activities for almost $40 million. I'm sure the minister will work towards getting a better breakdown of this in the future. But I want to ask about the community advisory boards that were supposed to be set up for correctional facilities. And whether they're indeed in place now, and are they
Community Advisory Board la situ metase on executive du kenesen.
a useful purpose, and they were, built into the new legislation.
Di metase oni de aji ala ko tagedesi metase on jimikuru janesen.
Minister of Justice.
Thank you. So the advisory boards that the member is speaking about.
The advisory board kesin ya tate hyuni deshi ko tani chuinle ko cheshuma advertise azita officers kesin as on diditi. Can you sanchoile?
The application period.
The application in da ni da sicha is ke kala make tene ko tegute dizeke.
Information on where we are with that and pretend.
The minister got to in Deputy Minister, Masi.
In
Ka, he's a canny descentane, the Zundanu. The application is him right up, Mandadi quite that dizeke.
If not done now, very soon, but we did receive low numbers and
Can you the application rajoute? Is it Honda Gachumetico di Chuan?
and we're hoping to that will be successful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm just quickly trying to troll through my own emails to see if I got a heads up about this, but if the minister or the staff want to send that again, I'd be happy to put it on my own Facebook page, MLA Facebook page, and so on. So, and I'm sure others would be as well. So, it'd be great to get those in place and operating. I don't think I have any other questions about this section, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Questions under
the corrections
turn to page 283, Justice Corrections Operation Expenditure Summary.
2022-2023 the KG 39,419 just Kanagawa Zoo Committee.
Move to page 287. We're on court services with information items on page 288. Questions for court services? Seeing none. Justice Court Services Operation Expenditure Summary 2022-2023 main estimates $15,123,000. Does committee agree? Thank you, committee. We'll now move to page 289, Justice Legal Aid Services, with information item on 290, 291. Are there any questions to Legal Aid Services?
For the Office of the Children's Lawyer, I note that it is more than the 2020-21 actuals, which is great. I can't say enough for the good work that this area is doing, and have had friends who have utilized the services of the children's lawyer for the benefit of their children. I think this is an area where we would want to see more money being put into, and perhaps a lot of people don't even realize, or I'm not sure how it's communicated to them, that there is this option.
Minister Could
the minister speak to whether or not we will be looking for more money down the line for this, and would he be coming back for
Thank you. Minister of Justice.
Thank you. For some detail on this item, I can ask the Deputy Minister to answer. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Minister Doolittle.
Madam Chair, There is nothing in this budget, but last year in 21-22, there was, the office did receive an increase in $99,000 in force growth funding. So we are watching this office and paying attention to the needs if there are any.
Die kommentar die quite die die kesia die code workers kesia go. Hitaji kesia 25-26 keani huti tia jago duka kondi moda di leyendi.
And they did receive an increase last year. Masi, Madam Chair.
Jaga sombana tatani la tia jawde.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is probably an area I don't know a lot about. Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. That an area that I don't know a lot about, but we have talked a lot on the Social Development Committee about perhaps a child advocate. If we were to have a child advocate, does the minister or the department think that this would then maybe take some of the strain off or relieve the need for the child's lawyer, or am I sort of just, they're completely separate and not related? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister of Justice.
Yes, they serve different purposes. I believe the child lawyer is when the courts require a child to have a lawyer, and then the lawyer is appointed to the child through that process, or the child advocate serves a different role altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Great Slave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess then again, I feel that is a silo. Again, we have children that have a need, and it would be nice if we could figure out some way to provide them with the services sort of all around them. But that's more of a comment than anything. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member. Are there any further questions from members under Legal Aid Services? Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. There's 3 positions that are being lost in Legal Aid Services, and I would just like to know more about why that's happening, especially if we're interested in increasing access to justice. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Because of the timing of these main estimates, we show a decline in positions, but it's because we are, it's the timing of when we sign our federal agreements, so there's no intention to lose these positions, but the agreement was not signed in time to have it printed in the main estimates. So that money will come forward through a SUP, and those positions will reappear through that SUP. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So what are we doing to try to increase access to justice through Legal Aid Services? What changes, if any, are being made in terms of this budget? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. There's one position being added. It is a data coordinator, and it has to do with, perhaps I can just ask the Deputy Minister to explain it, because it's a technical position. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Minister Doolittle.
Must be, Madam Chair, if I could just have a moment to sort through my papers. Yes, so this is involving electronic disclosure resources. During the pandemic, the PPSC, Public Prosecution Service of Canada, implemented a permanent procedure by which their staff now transfer virtually all disclosure for court evidence to the Legal Aid Commission electronically. And this has markedly increased the workload of the Legal Aid Commission staff and is causing significant operational disruption. They're not set up to receive disclosure electronically, both in system requirements and staff resources. Disclosure items include audio files, video, paper records, pictures, and its volume is thousands of individual documents and files. And lawyers also travel on circuit and need to have files readily accessible to both staff lawyers and non-GNWT private bar lawyers who are assigned files. So this position will help receive that and sort and take care of that, those new disclosure, electronic disclosure files. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks. I don't have anything further.
Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe right now, according to my count, there's 4 lawyers in the territory who don't live in Yellowknife, and one of them is a member of this House. Have we looked into the? I know we have some positions that work for legal aid in the communities. None of them are lawyers. Have we looked into the feasibility of moving one of the legal aid clinics outside of Yellowknife? I'm a believer that access to justice requires lawyers in places, even, just to have someone to talk to in a community. And is that something the department has reviewed? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister of Justice.
Thank you. I believe so. I know I asked the same question in the last assembly, so I can ask the Deputy Minister to speak to that a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Minister Doolittle.
Merci, Madam Chair. This is something that the department does look at and consider. We do have the clinics here located in Yellowknife, and they're set up that way so they can operate, have clients represented in each clinic that might be opposing each other. So it is something we look at. The lawyers also need to have colleagues available to talk to them, to discuss ideas, and court also is set up largely in Yellowknife. They do circuit courts, but having those clinics in the communities, we have had that in the past. There has been one in Inuvik, and the legal aid was moved out of the community. The PPSC, Prosecution Canada, was moved out of the community. So it was very difficult to have lawyers, legal aid lawyers, remain in those communities. The private bar is very small in these communities.
Da kota kota tse ke sila ko di legal aid lawyers se ke gani de. Ije honda kongo tasigun dilde ka. Kwegon deja ke jani de zo sa tu le khandi ko ke ta den dia tu le khandi juga chan ta zo yinda ko.
A tough time recruiting and retaining lawyers in our department, not just legal aid, but our drafters, our legal division counsel, and recruiting them into smaller communities.
Dene ke ta den di se ke ni de ko ta ko ra chele se ke ni de ka se se lia zo tu ko de ji na ko de ji.
Ways to be creative. Northwest Territories. Merci, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I recognize it would probably take some concerted effort, and I know.
That Yellowknife the casing here is condition say also Kizas a lati. The case Magago tiny day. Hita teacher casing la condition key Candy Yellowknife the cane day too late. He only the Yellowknife only get the city legality dated and get out in Dizeke. So choice long dinner sending.
On the side, do some other practice, that is much needed in those communities. Does the remote work policy apply to government lawyers? Would they be able to leave Yellowknife? Thank you.
Thank you.
What area la city le shingo ke sa odi tanekata den ke Yellowknife se ke
I can see if the Deputy Minister knows, understands.
Deputy Minister did the policy se ke hontera.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
No further questions. I'll bring it up another time. Thank you.
Minister Doolittle.
Merci, Madam Chair, and yes, it does apply. Lawyers are positions that certainly could work remotely, and in our, I think we would be happy to have them in any of our 33 communities, and they're currently. That would totally apply, and we would be open to considering. Merci, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay. Member for Montfouille.
One.
Montfouille.
According to according to the GNWT Health Status Report, it says in there that my region has the highest crime rate,
1 active positions. Why is that?
1 active positions. Why is that?
1 active positions. 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 1
when the report went.
Dia hite na ki honi la te ke gani te ko te tandia liaison na ke se o ji te chon region ga de sin.
Thank you. Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can get to later sections in here, and the TLEACHO will be receiving a number of RCMP positions, and in the past we've added a number of RCMP positions there as well. So we are adding positions, and we have added positions during my time here to that.
Region in the Kanda,
All right. Seeing none. Justice, Legal Aid Services, Operation Expenditure Summary, 2020.
Justice Legal Aid Service Operation Expenditures is 7,145,000 Kamina.
We will now move on to Justice Office of the Regulator of Oil and Gas Operations, beginning on page 293 with information page on 294. Questions? Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So there's a $700,000 decrease in the budget here for
the oil and gas is page 294 on the
Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have very little to do with the ROGO, as it is a regulator and it's parked in Justice. So what happened was this.
The activity the Kakala some bicycle contract
and work with a ROGO and make a determination about how much they would actually need to operate, understanding that the ROGO is relatively new and it was provided with the budget before it had done anything, and so it was someone's best guess at what a budget would be, and so understanding based on that review, the decision was made to listen to the recommendation of the review and make a cut to the operational budget. Thank you.
Recommendation again, that's a operation budget.
Madam Chair, so the review that was done, is that been made available to the public? And if not, and if there needed to be some redactions in terms of
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Thank you. I don't believe it is publicly available. I will have further discussions with the department, though, about that, because I'm always in favor of.
Thank
you. Member for Frame Lake.
Thanks, Madam Chair. No, I appreciate the Minister's commitment to make that information public, and I'm one of the members that
the public the minister
there's just very little, if any, interest whatsoever in oil and gas resources in the Northwest Territories. So why continue to spend money on managing them when there's no activity taking place? So I understand and pushed for that work to be done. So, but so when the money is cut, where does it go? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with recent events in the world's biggest natural gas producer, perhaps there will be an increase in oil and gas activity in the territory. And if that's the case, then we'll have to see what the operating budget would need to be under those circumstances. But the ROGO, it's funded from the general coffers of the GNWT, so it goes into the general coffers of the GNWT.
The general cost to the ROGO
Okay, thanks. I guess where I'm going with this is that, even in the minister's opening remarks, and I don't have them in front of me, I can't access them on Moodle, there was not one mention of reductions in the department. And so how is this actual reduction in the main estimates, how does it appear in what the minister said in classifying the changes in the Sure.
Thank you. Minister of Justice.
Thank you. So it's a reduction. It shows here as a reduction. There's less money this year than there was last year. So there was a cut to this. That money was then used for, something else the same way all other money in the territory or GNWT is used for something else. So it went into a big pot of money, and then, it was.
Thanks for that. I'm looking at this. It's clearly a reduction. That's not the way it's classified, though, by the Financial Management Board. I believe.
Financial Management Board kezi kantinigini ole jitawa si maganda kakandita tego kagontiko ole yandi.
Minister of Justice.
Thank you. I don't know if I can confirm or deny what is in confidential FMB materials. Thank you.
Minister, member for Frame Lake.
All right. Well, I don't believe I heard, and as I said, I don't have the minister's opening remarks in front of me, and they're not available on Moodle. I don't believe the minister said there was any reductions anywhere in the Department of Justice budget. Can the minister confirm that there were no reductions according to
Dilaki reductions who lately ditatin dizekezi da khadada ijila minister la khadin dilo liyendi.
For Frame Lake, Minister of Justice.
Thank you. So I'm saying right now there's a reduction to Arogo's budget, and Madam Chair, if we can take a short recess and we can sort of.
Let's just take a couple-minute break. I will turn it back over to Minister of Justice.
Minister of Justice. The member, you kind of ties accommodation. Department of Justice budget goes. As you did the case, method like you got on that. He da ka mega shuka can do budget in the guy. Is a kedu guy. That is that good lee on the Department of Justice has it. That is a member who is going to Tazon the Yilion. It's a case who can do Department of Justice a case.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Frame Lake.
Okay, thanks. And so moving forward in this set of main estimates, there's a reduction that was made. And now that I have the minister's opening remarks in front of me, I see basically that there was some forced growth in the departmental budget. There's some initiatives. There's something called other adjustments. There was reductions in travel and sunsets. So out of those, the 5 bulletins.
Travel, sunset, and others that you want to see, the minister cutting the is it out the city you cutting.
In these bulleted categories. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Thank you. So the main estimates say these are the highlights, and I guess it wasn't determined that this was a highlight of the budget, but I've stated, I don't know how many times now, that there was a reduction to the budget of Orogo, and I apologize for not stating that in the
Thanks. Let's stop dancing around here. Look, clearly there's a reduction made in this activity area, which is supposed to be our
activity reduction more that is
figure out where the money that was cut here actually goes, whether it just stays within the department and is treated as sort of
department on Kandi zeke meganda ni de ajili la method lali di zeke mezata zedin di zeke somba zeke gani de meze finance kandi gain tiny de down di somba si hulia tia gudli zen modat iji zeke siontele se in line de revenue fund zanate ko zeni de di si Tule Ragan Taratule said Segele, some Bazeki Jiwaris. The Cantini Donezua. The two another presentation of the Estile is Jitawaris, that the government see the key get this challenge is the some Bazeki, he see the some Bazeki makes a budget, they see. That is Hagadan Tazago.
Before.
Reductions all that they need. Say make you go to one method was gone. She can't deal this in
does that. And I encourage the Minister of Finance to look at this and make sure that it's a fair presentation. The public can understand.
Minister can DC the public was you get a Georgie goddess in the
and a regulator, not an arm within a particular department. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member or Minister of Justice.
Thank you. So every previous year when the Orogo budget would lapse, that money was then used by the Department of Justice to fund other things.
Department of Justice, I see Canada. You go do Hesila car make it data tarja and Jaja is a case Gazanda. Yundi Gai Gazunda is a Ketabucha Kesio. Takaguchara Guchade. Taki good lead Amodatio the lazy the Kesio. Takala di Tikago in the Estiatio dele. That is the case in London is the massy.
Thank you. Member for Great Slave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I may disagree with my colleague about the interest in oil and gas in the region, I share his concerns with the cutting of the
regulator
with the cutting of 2 positions, one at least
key position ki kala hut lady gainda sila dule di government
accounting reason to remove this money. That is not a scientific-based reason to take this money away. And if we are going to have MA taking that money and using it elsewhere in the government. I also look and note that there's a cut to contract services by about half of
the contract service me de hutli me ketene Asia down dio de yizeke oshu ita shiteke da shiteke jimo hutli modani se dizeke somba zeke sio
for Delta, that we're going to be having a regulator with no technical experience sitting there any further. Plus, you're overloading the technical person that's still left there, or the few technical people. I'm not sure that I have much of a question in that for the minister. Just some more colleagues. I guess my question is how much, who inputted on this review?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps Mr. Bancroft can speak to some of the technical aspects of the review. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bancroft.
Madam Chair. Yes, of course, there was multiple stakeholders' point of views taken into account throughout this review. Number one being the Executive Director of Origo, who was fully supportive of this review.
The ministry she zin de dizekea. Nakina metade a or dizekea. Thank
you. Member for Great Slate.
So we often hear that there's no crystal ball in this chamber. So to talk to government people about where they think things are going and deciding to cut, again, a regulator, I have concern with that.
The regulators you want to get out of the Nakitania department, you then a Kiata city, down the shades of the then the machine.
Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have anything to add to what Mr. Bancroft said. Thank you.
Member for Great Slate.
Thank you. I'll rephrase. Are one of the stakeholders the government consulted within the government, were they the employees within Origo? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From what I understand, the Executive Director was the one who was consulted. Thank you.
Executive Director, a technical person, does that person have a scientific background to understand this? Thank you.
Executive Director
there was a budget that was created for this this regulator. There was a review undertaken to look at what work has been done, what work will
regulator di Tiago Taza la Dizekeni. Lazihone da Dene de. What's a Lara Guzos de la Kada Yan?
Thank you. Member for Great Slave.
So will the minister then commit that when they come back needing more money as projects ramp up in the Beaufort Delta, that he'll find that money within the Department of Justice and not come back and take it from our social programs or housing? Thank you.
That is the case on Bakona or Loni, they wanted the case on Bakana Lalian.
Thank you. So I don't want to open another can of worms about where money comes from for regulators, but wherever it comes from, it's the coffers of the GNWT is where it comes from.
For Great Slave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to request that the Minister work with his colleague in ITI and provide us with a forecast of what is happening in the area of oil and gas, such that we can evaluate properly before we get to the point where we need more money.
The oil and gas operations that can situate the Kati, Takoti, the Kazi County, the car, Megaita, the Masi.
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm pretty hands-off with this regulator because it is arm's length. I think ITI probably would have that information.
Kala Kagotin, Tade, to go to Nasiande, come that is the case, the oil and gas case, the Asliago oil and the machine.
Thank you, Member for Great Slave.
Yeah, I have concern with that answer as well, just in the sense of like, well, then if you have nothing to do with it, why is it in your department? I get that it's justice. Then I would say perhaps it.
The already in the department,
I will just take that as I'm going to continue to harass the minister about this department or this regulator and hope that, you know, we will see business ramping up in the Beaufort Delta and therefore we will have need for regulators of oil and gas. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Did you have a follow-up, Member? Or
Minister of Justice and the COP, the ITI, the Minister, do
I have started the conversation with my cabinet colleagues about, you know, structure them and what departments they sit in because it is rather ad hoc. So maybe somewhere down the line we can figure this out and have a unified approach. Thank you.
thank you. Are there any further questions to the Office of the Regulator of the Oil and Gas Operations? Seeing none. Justice, Office of the Regulator.
Justice, Office of Regulator, the oil and gas operations in 2023, 1,230,000. Committee got on the Zoom.
Thank you. We will now go to page 296, Justice Policing Service. Question.
Justice Policing Service,
Member for Yellowknife North.
Yellowknife North.
Madam Chair, can the Minister just enlighten me a little about how our police contract works with requests from the RCMP for more staff? We are adding another $2 million to the policing budget. It's been on a bit of an upward trend. As the Minister noted, we've added officers to another number of communities. Does the Minister have to agree to these? Is there some sort of arbitration when the RCMP say they need more resources? I'm just kind of curious how we negotiate with the RCMP the quite appropriate level of resourcing. Thank you.
Collaboration between the Department of Justice and the RCMP to Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bancroft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the analysis that's generally undertaken is called
Bancroft the office
within collaboration with the Department of Justice. We meet semi-annually on business cases, stressors in under the TPSA as far as policing operations go throughout the territory. We look at things like key indicators like overtime costs, operational readiness, occurrences, incidences. They're all driving forces towards determining how many police members are required in a community. We take all that information, we track it, and as well as the RCMP tracks it to come up with the true need of a detachment, and that's how we determine the requirement for additional officers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you. Madam Chair. Can there? There's a number here, other adjustments, including 1.8 million, mainly for collective agreement increases. Can the minister just provide how much the RCMP's collective agreement increases were specifically?
Thank you. The RCMP's collective agreement is not reflected in this budget. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I believe I will be seeing that in a sub. I forgot. Can the minister provide I know there's quite a bit of money coming forward from the RCMP collective agreement, and the big question is the retroactive number. I know this is conversation happening all across Canada. Does the minister have any update on when and how much?
Contract service agreement.
So the RCMP pay their members, and so they've been paying them. They paid them the retroactive pay, and they haven't billed us for it yet. So.
Report says
Thank you. Mr. Bancroft.
Madam Chair. So the in-year pay increases for members below the rank of inspector have already been actioned. They began the retroactive portion of those payments on the January 25th pay for officers are affected by this agreement. That's anticipated to be completed by the end of March. The federal government has indicated that we will be likely seeing a
the retroactive the March
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we're all eagerly awaiting to see the size of that bill. There's $809,000 here for increased housing costs for RCMP members. Can I just get an explanation of whether that's money that then goes to the Housing Corp because they built those RCMP units, or is this a different housing cost? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister of Justice.
Thank you. I believe that's going to the Housing Corp, but Mr. Bancroft can provide some detail. Thank you.
Housing Corp
member is correct. It is going directly towards the Housing Corporation. Their building is 45 new housing units, 15 already complete and occupied.
And
we expense it at a 70% rate through the TPSA. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of get the math here. It makes sense for the Housing Corp to build RCMP units because then we get the 70% rate covered under the agreement, thus giving the Housing Corp a little revenue. Is this $809,000 our portion, or is this then under the 70-30 split? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Bancroft.
Mr. Bancroft Indian. Hey, you take any de la car 7% on the end.
Thank you, Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I get a bit of an explanation as to what the Internet Child Exploitation Unit is? I see there's $390,000. Are those officers that would be located in the Northwest Territories, or is this a cost?
It's a the $390,000.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I believe they're located in the Northwest Territories. That unit, unfortunately,
the unit is here to take what in there.
Type of exploitation that can lead to human trafficking, and so this unit focuses on the Northwest Territories and works with RCMP across Canada, and they could be working with law enforcement around the world actually to address some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any advancements or talks about increased RCMP presence in Sigachik?
Budget.
Thank you. That has not been brought forward. Thank you.
Are there any further questions on policing? Member for Tabacha.
So on 296, I mean, 3 lines, and we're spending 50 million there, and we have the added costs of 3.5 million for policing, for the extra whatever, and then you have the 8 million. So it's just well over 60 million. What does biology casework cover for 183,000?
Thank you. Minister of Justice.
Thank you. That is the cost of the lab work for forensic files.
Thank you. Member for Tabacha.
Okay. So the ratio between First Nation policing and the policing agreement, that's like a $49 million difference. You know, and most of the enforcement is with with Indigenous people. And you know, every time I look at this and see what's happening in the communities, it's you know, I've carried this file for, this is my 17th year, ever since I got elected as chief of Salt River. I just don't think, you know, you talked about 2 meetings a year with Justice. That's what they have.
Okina ya di Justice is you go on dan asilo. Cause the government, the community government, Indigenous government, is ya down the go get in.
They're going to say yes. You're going to say yes to me. I know that because they come with a form, and it's the same form that everybody signs every month. Finally, I told them not to come to the door anymore when I was chief. It's the same form, same thing for 14 years. And you wonder why I question what's happening. Everybody knows who's the drug dealers in the community. Everybody knows who does.
Ninety chile go 90, code 2 go 90, come go to the genre de Dizeki. Ita jiteke la tanti jiteke jiga.
With addictions. If the enforcement is not there, yeah, the other day you said, oh, they're going to replace it with another drug dealer. Does that mean they don't have to do anything then? It's very confusing for me because the protection and safety of the young people that are going to high school and even younger, and they, you know, and without proper enforcement and visibility in the communities and dialogue with the Indigenous governments and municipal governments, and they go there once a month to a meeting. What does that mean? You know, there's no visibility within the community. And $60 million, they don't even clean their own snow when it snows outside. I didn't know that, but now that there's one of the new duplexes across the road from my office, all they have to do is jump in the car and drive around. And it's very puzzling to me that we have no accountability and no transparency with this file. And yet we're dishing out $60 million without no accountability and no transparency and no oversight. And that's why I'm not going to give up on this file until some of those things are corrected for the community. And I have a lot of people complaining about, you know, even I went myself before Christmas to the detachment. I waited outside there for an hour and a half. No one answered the door because I had a complaint. And then I go back down the road to my office, and the guy's in uniform hanging up the lights on his, Christmas lights on his building in uniform. Very, very, you know, we've got to have more accountability and transparency with this file, especially when we're dispersing that amount of money. And I'm not going to say any more because I'll stay on this file and I'll keep on asking questions. And, you know, I know you went through the whole, and they're not serving every community yet. You know, my colleague just asked if there was an RCMP in Sigajik, and there isn't. So the big empire is here again, and, you know, and the communities have got to be served to the fullness with their duties. And when the person at the RCMP station finally arrived, and I went in there, so what do you want here? And I told her, oh, I told her the situation that I came for. And she says, well, what do you want me to do with that? That was her answer. And that's a RCMP officer. I said, oh, just forget it, I'll just go. So I left. I never identified myself or anything. I just went there for a concern. And if this is what's happening to myself, what is happening to the rest of the people in the community? And that's a big question. I know you can't do anything about it today, Mr. Minister, and but I want you to think of some of these things because accountability and transparency for that amount of money has got to take place. It's your duty as the Minister of Justice, and I will continue on this file as long as I know that, and whenever I'm here, because I think that it has to take place. Leadership plays a big role in that. If you have the right commander, you would, you know, the guy, nobody knows who he is. I know who he is. But, you know, if they're going to reach out to the communities and reach out to the things, taking a photo op with the Dene Nation is not serving the communities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member for Tabacha. Minister, did you have any comments? No? Okay. Are there any further questions?
Sikala teko sare sini de di policing teki ani. Mafi.
They add more police service in the communities. Okay, police are to keep peace and order, we know that, and to make residents feel safe. But I just want to ask the minister, I would like to know what is the Department of Justice is doing to reduce crime rate in the community. Is it 6 o'clock? Okay.
Thank you.
Policing teki ko tazeki atanti ya situle te oze tiazeleyen.
2 minutes, I guess I move that the chair rise and report progress, and then I'll answer the question tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay.
Choni de kadusine di masi.
Report progress. Motion is in order.
Takatu motion is mogotan de la kanezu in ladus telegoa. Sitlego sarsin de ka motion taris shikatu ni sandi masi. Tile report na tekan di ni victimly. Mr. Speaker, copy the KC-23-2938 Minister Statement COVID-19 to Table 6 Table Document the KC. Ija wrote the KC o kaya ti ta progress aja ita ta ti the KC community the whole sika nagite masi. Aro nothing. Immediately motion directed. Mr. Clerk, order of the day.
Of the day for Friday, March 4th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Prayer, minister statements, member statements, returns to oral questions, recognition of visitors in the gallery, acknowledgements, oral questions, returns to written questions, replies to commissioner's address, petitions, reports of committees on the review of bills, reports of standing and special committees, tabling of documents, notices of motions, notices of motion for first reading of bills, second reading of bills, consideration in committee of the whole of bills and other matters, bills 23, 29, and 38, Minister Statement 202-19-2, table documents 561, 567, 578, and 579-19-2, report of committee of the whole, third reading of bills, orders of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This House stands adjourned until Friday, March 4th.
Chong, hone no ni on the kids ni sia ni masi.